Some doors are locked for a reason, and some shadows know exactly where you are. I was 22, a theater arts senior teetering on the edge of graduation, my life a blur of late nights and last-minute assignments. My final hurdle was a quarter credit, stint in the campus costume shop, stitching props for a quirky musical set to premiere in days. The shop, buried in the basement of our ancient theater building, was a maze of dusty fabrics and humming sewing machines, its stone walls swallowing. Sound like secrets. I loved the work, threading needles, shaping costumes, but the building unnerved me. Its Grecian pillars and creaking halls felt alive, whispering tales of students who'd seen things they couldn't explain. I'd laugh off the rumors, blaming my overactive imagination. But that Saturday, as I hurried toward the shop, I learned that some shadows don't wait for night to hunt. It was 1 p.m., my head foggy from a late-night movie marathon. The theater building loomed ahead, its pillars stark against a gray sky. The air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. Halfway to the entrance, I froze. A man leaned against the stone staircase, his greasy hair glinting under the weak sun. He wore a bulky parka and snow boots, absurd in the 65-degree Nive heat, his tattered jeans clinging to thin legs. I dubbed him Parker Guy, a name to tame the unease creeping up my spine. His face was unremarkable, but his eyes, God, those eyes, were voids, tracking me with a stillness that sucked the warmth from the air. Keep walking, don't look back. I forced a smile, a reflex I cursed instantly. He didn't smile back. His gaze followed me up the steps, through the glass doors, boring into my back like a blade. He's just a drifter, I told myself, but my hands trembled as I gripped the strap of my bag. In the costume shop, I spilled everything to Sarah, my co-worker and confidant. He was just standing there, staring, I said, my voice unsteady. Sarah smirked, her needle pausing mid-stitch. Probably some townie lost on campus, but her eyes flickered with unease, and she shared a story I hadn't heard. Last year, a freshman claimed she'd seen a man in a heavy coat lurking near the theater at dusk. She'd felt watched, her dorm room window rattling that night, though. No one was there. The story spread, then faded, dismissed as stress or shadows. Sarah laughed it off, but the shop felt colder now, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. Was it the same guy? I buried myself in work, sewing beach balls into a bikini top for the show, but the podcast in my ears couldn't drown the unease. When Sarah left at 4:30, the silence pressed against me, thick and suffocating. You're alone now. Stay sharp. The costume shop was a labyrinthine rectangle, split by sewing tables piled with fabric scraps. One end led to the backstage, the other to a hallway for the auditorium and costume storage. Near my station was a metal door to what our director called the weird courtyard, a fenced-in junkyard of HVAC units and electrical boxes, locked tight to keep us from getting trapped outside. I sat facing that door 20 feet away, stitching snaps onto a blouse as the clock neared 6 p.m. The show's dress rehearsal is Monday. Focus. But the shop felt wrong, its shadows too deep, the air stale with dust and old thread. Then it came. A sharp scraping sound, like claws on steel. I froze, the needle slipping from my fingers. My podcast faded, replaced by my pulse hammering in my ears. I bent to retrieve the needle, breath shallow, and when I looked up, the door's window wasn't empty. Someone was there, watching. It was Parker Guy. His pale face pressed against the glass, lit by the hallway's sickly glow. Those eyes, empty, unblinking, like twin black holes, pinned me in place. He found me. He's here. He twisted the doorknob, the metal rattling with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound was a heartbeat, steady, predatory, Run, hide, do something, but my body betrayed me, rooted to the chair. The shop closed in, mannequins looming like silent witnesses, their faceless heads tilting in the dark. He knocked. 3 slow, heavy thuds that echoed in my chest. Then harder, the door shaking in its frame, a thunder promising violence. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair, and sprinted to the shop's main door, slamming it shut and twisting. The lock. He can't get in. He can't. I dove into the fabric storage closet, the door clicking shut behind me. In the dark, surrounded by bolts of musty cloth, I dialed campus safety, my voice a broken whisper. He's outside. Please hurry. Campus safety arrived in minutes, their flashlights cutting through the shop's gloom. They searched the courtyard, the fence, the building. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of Parker Guy. He was gone, like he'd never existed. They escorted me to my dorm, kind enough to grab me dinner from the dining hall as I shook too hard to walk alone. A police officer took my statement, but what could I say? A man with no name, no motive, just eyes that didn't belong to this world. I never returned to the shop alone. The musical went on, but every stitch I sewed carried his gaze. Who was he? Why me? The questions haunt me, looping endlessly, pulling me back to that locked door. I see him in every shadow, every flicker of light. Is he still out there, waiting? Some nights I wake gasping, certain I hear that knock, slow, deliberate, calling me back to the dark. The wind howled like a living thing, clawing at the walls of our crumbling house in Columbus, Georgia, as if it wanted to tear us from the warmth inside and swallow us into the night. It was one of those rare winters, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, when snow blanketed the South in a way that felt unnatural, like the world had tilted off its axis. The house, ancient and sagging, stood on land carved out in the late 1800s by some eccentric who turned 9 types of soil into his private Eden for me. With allergies that turned every breath into a battle, it was a nightmare. Except on nights like this, when the snow smothered the pollen and silenced the world. But that silence, it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. My father, a retired Marine, sat by the fireplace, the amber glow catching the edges of his face as he nursed a bottle of whiskey. He wasn't a bad man, but the war had left scars deeper than skin, and the liquor was his way of keeping them quiet. I was up too, despite the hour, because when Dad got drunk, he'd talk, endless streams of stories, half lucid, half dream. You ever feel like someone's listening when you talk, even when the room's empty? That night, as we fed logs into the fire, the dogs curled up in their corner, oblivious. I felt it. A presence, just beyond the edges of the light. The firewood pile was dwindling, and Dad, swaying slightly, insisted we fetch more. I grabbed my coat, the cold biting my fingers as I stepped into the backyard. The snow had slowed, but a thick fog clung to the ground, swirling like a living thing. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in a world where the air itself feels like it's watching you. Beyond our yard, a retaining pond separated us from the hill where the funeral home stood, its parking lot lit by 2 dim streetlights. Their glow barely pierced the fog, but it was enough to catch a shape, a small silhouette no taller than 4 feet standing alone in the snow. Dad saw it too. His eyes, bleary from drink, sharpened. "That's a kid," he muttered, his voice low, like he didn't trust his own words. Have you ever seen something that made your heart scream to run, but your feet moved toward it instead? We were halfway decent people, or at least we tried to be. So we trudged up the hill, the snow crunching under our boots. The closer we got, the clearer the figure became. A boy, no older than 11. His skin so pale it seemed to glow against the night. He wore only a thin nightgown, tattered and clinging to his frail frame. His eyes, wide and unblinking, held a terror that rooted me to the spot. "Kid, you okay?" Dad's voice was gentle now, the whiskey haze burning off. The boy didn't speak, just trembled, his breath shallow, like he'd been out here for hours. Feel the cold seeping into your bones, the kind that makes you wonder if you'll ever be warm again. I reached out, but he flinched, stepping back as if my touch might shatter him. Dad knelt, his voice soft but firm. "Come with us, son. We'll get you warmed up, get you something to eat." The boy's gaze flickered, and he nodded, just a slight dip of his head, before following us down the hill. The walk back felt endless, the fog curling around us like fingers. You ever walk somewhere and feel like the world's holding its breath? At the back door, we stepped into the laundry room, the air thick with the scent of detergent and damp wool. The boy crossed the threshold and something shifted. His trembling stopped. His face, so haunted moments before, softened into a calm I couldn't explain. It was like he'd found something he'd been searching for, something we couldn't see. Dad and I turned to grab blankets, a space heater, maybe some soup from the kitchen. It took less than 10 seconds, but when I glanced back, the boy was gone. Gone. No sound, no trace, just the empty laundry room staring back at us. I grabbed Dad's arm, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. He turned, his face draining of color, his Cherokee skin paling to match the snow outside. We rushed to the door, flung it open, and searched the yard. The snow was untouched. Our boot prints carved deep paths, but there was nothing else. No barefoot tracks. No sign of the boy who'd stood there moments ago. Imagine staring at a blank page where a story should be, and knowing the words were there, but you can't read them. Dad and I stood there, the cold creeping into our bones, our breaths clouding the air. He looked at me, his eyes wide, like he was questioning his own sanity. "You saw him, right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I didn't touch liquor, not then, not ever, so this wasn't some drunken haze. What do you do when you see something that shouldn't exist and it sees you back? For days we asked around, desperate for answers. Neighbors shook their heads, puzzled by our story of a boy in a nightgown. It wasn't until Dad spoke to Mrs. Thunderberg, a woman so old she seemed to carry the weight of the land's history in her bones, that we got something close to an explanation. Listen closely now, because this is where the past bleeds into the present. She sat us down in her parlor, her voice low and steady, and told us a story from her childhood. Long before our house was built, when the area was little more than fields and dirt roads, a boy had died in a rare Georgia snowstorm. He was found frozen, clad only in a nightgown, not far from where we lived. No one knew his name or how he'd ended up there, but the story lingered, whispered on nights when the snow fell heavy. People claimed to see his silhouette, a fleeting shadow in the fog, but no one had ever gotten close until us. Feel the weight of that for a moment. A child, lost to the cold, wandering for decades, maybe centuries. Dad and I pieced it together as best we could. Maybe the boy had been locked out. A cruel accident or something worse during a blizzard like the one in 1899 or 1910. His frail body wouldn't have lasted long in the freezing dark. But why did he vanish when we brought him inside? Was it the warmth he craved, or something deeper, something we'll never understand? Years have passed, 15, maybe more, and that night still haunts me. I've asked neighbors, friends, anyone who might have lived near us, but no one's seen what we saw. Sometimes I lie awake staring at the ceiling, and I see his face, half frozen, eyes wide with a fear that wasn't just cold, but something ancient, something lonely. What if he'd been out there all this time, waiting for someone to notice? Him to care enough to bring him in? If that's true, if it took 100 years for someone to offer him shelter, that's a tragedy I can't shake. Close your eyes and ask yourself, what would you do if you saw him standing in the snow, staring back at you? The forest was alive that night, whispering secrets through the rustling leaves, secrets I wasn't meant to hear. At 14, I thought I knew the world, but Ireland's lonely landscapes taught me fear in ways I'd never imagined. My family had uprooted from England's bustle to a forgotten village in the Irish Midlands, a place so quiet, the silence felt like a weight on your chest. Our cottage clung to the edge of nowhere, surrounded by fields that stretched into the horizon, broken only by patches of wild, untamed land. I was restless, always seeking escape, and my border collie, Macy, was my only companion in those endless explorations. But that evening, in the dim heart of a public forest, I learned what it means to feel hunted. Back then, I was still adjusting to Ireland's strangeness. The village was a speck, a handful of houses and a single pub, with nothing to do but wander. Macy's eager barks were my soundtrack, her paws churning the earth as we roamed. I'd discovered a bogland first, a sprawling, uneven stretch of peat and man-made forest, where I'd follow an old railway line used for transporting peat. The bog was haunting, its air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, but I loved its solitude. Yet, something about it, maybe the way the ground seemed to swallow my footsteps, made me stop going. Instead, I found a public forest 20 minutes from our village, a place my dad would drive me to, dropping me off with Macy to wander its quiet trails. He'd run errands and pick us up hours later, leaving me to lose myself in the woods' embrace. That forest was different. Its trees stood tall, their branches weaving a canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns. The trails were well-trodden, marked by the occasional jogger or dog walker. But it was the silence that drew me in, a silence so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. Imagine standing in a place where every sound feels like an intrusion, where the air itself seems to watch you. On weekends, I'd explore every path, Macy bounding ahead, her black and white fur a blur against the green. Sometimes we'd find hidden treasures, a stream bubbling over rocks, a clearing where wildflowers danced, or a teepee-shaped hut made of logs, its sticks woven like a child's forgotten fort. That hut became our playground. I'd hide inside, giggling as Macy circled, her nose twitching, trying to find me. She'd never think to look inside, her whines echoing as she pawed the ground outside. Those moments were pure, innocent, untouched by the fear that would soon stain them. That evening the sky was bruised with twilight, the kind of dusk that blurs the line between day and night. Dad had dropped us off, promising to return after his errands. The forest felt different, heavier, as if it knew something I didn't. Macy trotted beside me, her leash loose in my hand, as we followed our usual trail. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, and the light was fading fast, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me. I decided to take a shortcut through a narrow side trail, one that wound past the log teepee. The path was overgrown, roots snaking across the dirt, and I had to watch my step to avoid tripping. Macy's ears twitched, her head turning as if she sensed something in the underbrush, but I brushed it off. She was always alert, always curious. We reached the teepee, its silhouette stark against the deepening gloom, and I paused, tempted to play our hide-and-seek game. But something stopped me, a prickle at the back of my neck, a whisper of unease that told me to keep moving. Then I saw him. I glanced back. a casual habit from years of exploring alone. And there he was, a man maybe 20 meters behind, stepping onto the side trail. His walk was deliberate, each step measured, yet there was something off about it, something that made my stomach twist. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light, but his outline was sharp, tall, lean, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the shadows. Feel that moment when your heart skips, when instinct screams louder than reason. I told myself it was nothing, just another walker, but my body disagreed. My pulse quickened and I clipped Macy's leash tighter, urging her forward. The trail was narrow, forcing me to focus on the path, but I could feel his presence behind me, like a weight pressing against my spine. I didn't dare look back again, not yet. The main trail was just ahead, its wider path promising safety. But the evening had turned darker, the trees swallowing what little light remained. Macy's low whine cut through the silence, a sound I'd never heard from her before. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and my breath caught. He was closer now, maybe 10 meters away, his figure curving around the trail's bend. His head was tilted as if studying me, and though I couldn't see his eyes, I felt them. Cold, unblinking, locked on me. "Run!" my mind screamed, but my legs felt heavy, trapped in a dream where movement is impossible. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers, clumsy as I dialed Dad's number, praying he'd pick up. The call rang and rang, each unanswered tone a stab of panic. He was probably still driving, I told myself, but the thought offered no comfort. I quickened my pace, Macy's nails scraping the dirt as she matched my stride, her body tense. The car park was in sight, a clearing of gravel and shadows, but it was empty except for one car, a dark sedan that wasn't Dad's. The world shrank to that moment, to the crunch of my shoes, the thud of my heart, the hum of danger in the air. I reached a picnic bench and sank onto it, my legs trembling, pretending to scroll through my phone to look unapproachable. Macy pressed against my feet, her warmth grounding me, but her soft whines grew louder, more insistent. I stole a glance toward the trail, and there he was, emerging from the darkness, his steps slow and deliberate. Time slowed, each second stretching into eternity, as fear coiled tighter around my chest. He walked past, not looking at me, and climbed into the sedan. Relief flickered, but it died when he didn't drive away. He sat there, engine running, headlights piercing the night, their beams slicing through the trees like a predator's gaze. Minutes dragged on, 5, 10, 20. I was alone, exposed, a girl and her dog in a sea of darkness waiting for rescue that might never come. I called Dad again, then texted, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely type. No answer. Macy grew frantic, pawing at the ground beneath. The bench, digging a hole with desperate scraping motions. Her whines turned to low growls, her eyes fixed on the car. She knew something I didn't, something ancient and primal, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to rationalize the man's behavior. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was lost. But each excuse felt hollow, drowned out by the hum of his engine, a constant reminder of his presence. The night pressed in, heavy and suffocating, and I felt like prey, watched, cornered, powerless. Then salvation. The sedan's engine revved, its tires crunching gravel as it reversed and pulled onto the main road. I exhaled, my body sagging with relief, but the fear lingered, sharp and cold. Macy stopped digging, her growls fading, but she stayed close, her fur bristling. I sat there, alone in the dark, the forest looming behind me, its shadows whispering, of dangers unseen. 10 minutes later, Dad's car rolled into the lot, his headlights a beacon in the nightmare. I climbed in, Macy leaping after me, and when I asked why he was late, his answer hit like a slap. He'd forgotten to pick us up. Anger flared, but fear drowned it. Fear that still clung to me like damp clothes. That night changed me. I never walked alone in the forest again, not at dusk, not ever. The man might have been harmless, a stranger lost in his own world, but the way he watched, the way he lingered, felt like a promise of something darker. Macy knew it too. Her unease was my warning, her instincts sharper than mine. Close your eyes and imagine it. A girl, a dog, a forest, and a shadow that doesn't belong. I learned to trust my gut, to listen when the world feels wrong, because sometimes the line between safety and danger is as thin as a whisper in the dark. The clock hadn't ticked past 3 a.m. when the darkness outside my window seemed to pulse, alive with something I couldn't name. In our rough neighborhood, where streetlights flickered like dying stars and every shadow hid a threat, sleep was a fragile thing. My brother and we lived in a house that felt more like a fortress, its walls scarred by the chaos of the streets. Just a week ago, some girl from the block had smashed my car window, leaving glass glittering like cruel confetti. So when the pounding on our front door shattered the silence, frantic, desperate, paired with a child sobbing, I bolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs. Was this another trick, or something worse? My brother, always quicker to act than think, was already out of bed, his shotgun a cold extension of his arm. His voice boomed through the house, raw and jagged, shouting into the night, "It's 3 a.m., get lost!" I could feel the exhaustion in his words, the kind that comes from living on edge too long. We were both drained, nerves frayed from the constant vigilance this place demanded. But the crying didn't stop. It grew louder, more broken, like someone was unraveling out there. I crept to the door, my bare feet cold against the floorboards, and pressed my face to the window. The one-way film turned the outside world into a blur, but I saw nothing. No figure, no movement, just the empty street swallowed by fog. Or was there something in that fog, watching? Crouching low, I held my breath, straining to hear over the thud of my own pulse. The sobs were clearer now, a young girl's voice, trembling and raw, pleading, "Please, help me. I need to call my mom." Her words clawed at me, tugging at something human I didn't want to feel. I whispered to my brother that I was calling 911, my fingers fumbling with the phone. The operator's voice was a lifeline, calm and distant, promising help. But my brother, wired on adrenaline, wasn't waiting. He yanked the door open, shotgun still in hand, and bellowed at the figure outside to calm down. I winced at his harshness. Half the block must have heard her screams by now, pressed against our door like a trapped animal. But when I saw her, my breath caught and the world tilted. She was just a kid, kneeling on our doorstep, her face pale as moonlight, eyes wide with a terror that felt too deep, too ancient for someone so young. Her gaze locked onto mine, and it was like staring into a void where hope had drowned. I guess she was maybe 14, but her voice, shaky and insistent, claimed she was 18. She wore a thin tank top and shorts, barely enough for the chilly night, and her bare feet were smudged with dirt. She stammered about a car crash down the street, how she'd left her phone in the wreck and needed to call her mom. But something was wrong. Her story felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Why was she alone? Why no phone, no shoes, no coat? I asked her name, her mom's number, anything to anchor her story, but her answers were vague, her eyes darting like she was chasing shadows only she could see. My brother lowered the shotgun, but his jaw stayed tight, his eyes scanning the street for threats. I wanted to believe her, to wrap her in a blanket and make this right, but doubt gnawed at me. Her pleas to come with her to the crash site felt like a lure, a siren's call in the dark. I refused, planting myself by the door, telling her the cops were coming. But her eyes, God, those eyes, kept pulling me in, begging me to trust her. Then, through the fog, I saw the red glow of tow trucks rumbling past, heading toward where she said the crash was. Maybe she was telling the truth. Against my better judgment, I agreed to walk with her, my brother staying back, his silhouette a grim sentinel in the doorway. The street was eerily quiet as we walked, the fog curling around us like a living thing. She stayed close, too close, her bare arm brushing mine, her voice a fragile thread. She kept asking to hold my hand, her fingers trembling as they reached for me. I hesitated. I'm a grown man, and she looked like a teenager. Her clothes too thin for the cold, her desperation too raw. What would the neighbors think seeing us like this? I asked her age again, and she muttered 18, grabbing my hand before I could pull away. Her touch was ice cold, and it sent a shiver through me, like I'd touched something that didn't belong in this world. I tried to focus on the road, on the distant hum of the tow trucks, but her presence was suffocating, her silence louder than her earlier sobs. Halfway down the street, headlights cut through the fog, and a police cruiser pulled up. Relief flooded me, but it was laced with dread. I flagged them down, explaining the girl, the crash, her story. She interrupted, her voice frantic, repeating, "I have ADHD, I have anxiety," like a mantra to ward off questions. Then she did something that froze me. She peeled off her false eyelashes, a full set, and pressed them into my hand. They were damp, fragile like the wings of a dead moth, and I took them only to keep her calm. But holding them felt wrong, like I was clutching a piece of her unraveling reality. One officer pulled her aside, his voice low, while the other asked me questions, his tone casual but probing. He mentioned a call from 30 minutes earlier. Someone had seen a barefoot teenager running across a lawn nearby. I glanced at her feet, bare and filthy, and my stomach twisted. As the officer spoke, I saw the other cop cuff her, her wrists disappearing behind her back. Her eyes met mine one last time, and I swear they weren't human anymore. Just hollow, endless pits. The officer beside me noticed the eyelashes in my hand and chuckled. "What are you gonna do with those, bro?" I mumbled something about sleep, my voice distant, my mind reeling. I just wanted to be home, away from her, away from whatever she was. I walked back alone, the fog thicker now, swallowing the streetlights. My neighbor, leaning against his fence, shrugged when I told him what happened. He figured it was her parents' mess, some domestic drama he didn't want to touch. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Back in my room, sleep wouldn't come. Her face haunted me, those eyes that seemed to know too much and nothing at all. Was she a victim, lost and broken? Or something else, something that wore a girl's skin to get close? I kept the eyelashes on my nightstand, afraid to touch them, afraid to throw them away. I prayed for her family, for whatever truth lay beneath her story. But deep down, I knew I'd never sleep soundly again, not with the memory of her knocking, her voice echoing in the dark. The house was alive at night, its creaking bones whispering secrets I was too young to understand. When I was 12, that summer felt like a dream, the kind where you're not sure if you're awake or trapped in someone else's nightmare. Our old house, tucked in a quiet corner of some forgotten town, was a maze of shadows and dust. My cousin, stuck with a broken knee, was crashing with us, his crutches tapping out a rhythm that echoed through the halls. We'd spend nights lost, in video games, The glow of the screen, our only shield against the dark. But have you ever felt the air shift? Like something slipped into the room without opening a door? It was late. The kind of late where the world feels too still, too heavy. My cousin was in the living room, probably dozing off to some grainy TV show. I was alone in my room, sprawled on the floor, the controller slick in my hands as I battled. Pixelated monsters. The house was quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine a silence so deep it hums, like it's waiting for you to notice it. My room was a fortress. Posters on the walls, a messy bed, a safe haven, or so I thought. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught it. A flicker of movement low to the ground where the shadows pooled like ink. I froze, my thumbs hovering over the controller. You ever see something and pray it's just your mind playing tricks? The game's music looped, tinny and distant as I stared into the dark. There, near the foot of my bed, something moved. It wasn't human, not quite. Its limbs were wrong, too long, too twisted, like a puppet strung together by a madman. It crawled, slow and deliberate, its body scraping against the floor with a sound like dry leaves dragged over stone. Feel your heart climb into your throat, beating so loud, you're sure it hears you. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, stolen by the thing that shouldn't exist. Its head, or what passed for a head, tilted, as if it sensed me watching. Look away, I told myself. Look away. But I couldn't. Its form shimmered like heat rising off asphalt, and it let out a noise. A low, guttural hum that crawled into my skull and stayed there. I thought of my cousin, his leg useless, unable to pull off a prank like this. What if it's not a prank? What if it's real? My hands shook as I dropped the controller, the game forgotten. The thing inched closer, its movements jerky, unnatural, like it was learning how to exist in my world. I bolted. My legs moved before my brain caught up, carrying me out the door and down the hall. Run. Just run. Don't look back. The air felt thick, like I was pushing through water, and every step echoed in my ears. I burst into the living room, where my cousin looked up, startled, his crutches propped against the couch. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. I spilled it all, the crawling thing, the noise, the way it looked at me. He laughed, called it a nightmare, but his eyes darted to the hallway, like he felt it too. You ever tell someone the truth and see them doubt you, even when they're scared? I didn't sleep in my room for a week. The couch became my refuge, the living room lamp my guardian. But even there I felt it, the weight of eyes on me, pressing through the walls. Imagine living in a house where every shadow feels like a threat. For 6 years I stayed in that house, and that room never felt right again. It was heavy, like the air was laced with secrets too old to name. I'd catch myself staring at the corner, waiting for that shape to crawl out again, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. Years later, I learned about the house from an old neighbor, a woman with eyes like she'd seen too much. Listen closely, because this is where the story turns. She told me about a family who'd lived there decades ago, before we moved in. A child, sick and frail, had died in that room, locked away during a fever that burned through the town. Some said the child never left, that their pain lingered, twisting into something else. What if pain can grow, can crawl, can watch you from the dark? I'm older now, but the memory of that night clings to me like damp cloth. Lie still for a moment. Feel the dark pressing against your eyelids. I don't know what I saw. Something real, something born from fear, or something that found me because I was alone. I've moved away, built a life far from that house, but sometimes in the quiet of night, I hear that hum, faint and distant, like it's waiting for me to come back. What would you do if you saw it crawling toward you, knowing no one would believe you? Midnight in my family's ancient home felt like stepping into a dream, where the walls whispered secrets too old to understand. The air was thick with history, heavy with stories I'd always dismissed as folklore. Our ancestral house in the Philippines, a creaking relic of 50 years, stood like a sentinel in the quiet province, its wooden beams etched with the lives of generations before me. I was a skeptic, rolling my eyes at tales of spirits and curses. But that night, as I lay beside my sleeping boyfriend, the house decided to teach me fear. Something was watching us, and it wasn't human. We'd moved into the house temporarily, seeking refuge from the city's chaos. The rooms were cluttered with relics, faded photographs, chipped porcelain, a grandfather clock that ticked unevenly, as if reluctant to mark time. Every corner held a memory, but some memories felt alive, waiting. My boyfriend, exhausted from a day of helping with chores, had collapsed into sleep, his soft snores a steady rhythm against the hum of cicadas outside. I was restless, propped against the headboard, my phone glowing with YouTube videos, their mundane chatter a shield against the house's oppressive silence. Our room was rectangular, the bed facing wide windows that let in slivers of moonlight, painting the walls in ghostly silver. The router in the corner blinked its neon green, a modern intrusion in this ancient space, its light a small comfort. Then he stirred, and the night turned wrong. My boyfriend jolted awake, his voice sharp with irritation. "Stop tapping my foot," he snapped, his eyes bleary but accusing. I froze, my phone slipping in my hand. "I didn't touch you," I said, my voice small, confused. Feel that moment when reality frays, when the familiar becomes strange. He insisted, describing a rhythmic pressure on his foot, like fingers drumming insistently. I laughed it off, suggesting he'd dreamed it, but his frown deepened, and a chill settled in my chest. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker, as if the house itself was listening. I returned to my videos, but the unease lingered, a quiet warning I couldn't shake. An hour later, exhaustion pulled me under, and I drifted into sleep, unaware that the night had more to show me. At 3 a.m., the world broke. I woke with a start, my heart pounding as if I'd been shaken. The room was wrong, too still, too dark. Imagine a darkness so deep it feels alive, swallowing every spark of light. The router's green glow, usually a constant, was gone, replaced by a void in the corner. A blackness that seemed to pulse. My eyes strained, waiting to adjust, but the darkness held firm, unnatural, oppressive. Stare into that void and feel it stare back. I sat up, my breath shallow, and focused on the corner. Slowly a shape emerged. A silhouette, impossibly tall, its head brushing the ceiling. It was a man, but not a man. Its form too thin, too elongated, its edges blurring into the shadows. No face, no eyes, just a presence that pressed against my mind, heavy and ancient. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Time stopped, trapping me in a nightmare where fear is the only truth. The figure didn't move, but I felt it. Its attention, cold and unyielding, pinning me to the bed. My boyfriend slept on, oblivious, his breathing a cruel reminder of my isolation. I stared at the shadow, counting seconds, praying it was a dream. 10 seconds passed, then 20, and still it stood, a sentinel of dread. Close your eyes and see it. A thing that shouldn't exist watching you from the dark. I forced myself to blink to break the spell, and when I opened my eyes it was still there, unmoving, eternal. Panic clawed at me, and I whispered his name, my voice barely a breath. He didn't stir, and the shadow seemed to lean closer, its presence a weight on my soul. Morning came like a mercy, the sun banishing the night's terrors. I stumbled to the bathroom, my body trembling, and when I returned, my boyfriend was awake, his face grim. "You saw it too," he said before I could speak, his words a knife in my gut. We'd shared a nightmare, and that made it real. He described the same figure, tall and faceless, looming in the corner when he'd woken earlier, the same tapping on his foot that had roused him. He'd stayed silent, hoping to protect me, but now we were both exposed, our skepticism shattered. Recall a time you felt truly powerless when the world revealed its hidden face. We sat in silence, the house's walls closing in, its history no longer a story, but a threat. We couldn't stay silent. That afternoon, we called a priest, a quiet man with knowing eyes who didn't question our fear. His prayers were a shield, his holy water a blade against the unseen. He blessed every room, his chants echoing through the house, driving back the shadows. The router blinked again that night, its light steady, and the corner was just a corner, empty and mundane. No tapping, no figures, no darkness that breathed, but the memory lingers, a scar on my soul. I walk through the house differently now, my steps cautious, my eyes darting to corners. The stories I once laughed at, tales of spirits bound to these. Walls are no longer myths. Something lives here and it knows my name. In the heart of a rare Georgia blizzard, I saw a face that's haunted me for 15 years. A face that shouldn't have been there. Back when I lived in Columbus, Georgia, our house was a crumbling relic from the late 1800s, its walls sagging under the weight of time. The land it sat on was a patchwork of 9 different soils, a twisted dream of the man who'd bought it long ago to craft his own paradise garden. But for me, with my cursed allergies, it was a nightmare. Pollen hung in the air like a golden fog, choking me every spring, except during the heavy rains that washed it away or the rare snowy winters that blanketed the world in silence. It was one of those winters, a night so cold it felt like the earth itself had died, that I met him. The snow had started days ago, a freak event for Georgia, piling up in drifts that glittered under the faint moonlight. I can't recall the exact year, maybe the early 2000s, maybe a bit later, but it was a storm that locals still talk about, a once-in-a-generation freeze that turned our town into a ghost of itself. Inside, the house was warm, the fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the walls. My dad, a retired Marine, sat slouched in his chair, a bottle of whiskey in hand, his eyes glassy from drink. He'd always had a problem with the bottle, a way to drown the ghosts of his past. But that night, I was the one who couldn't sleep. I stayed up, half out of habit, half because his drunken ramblings, endless stories that flowed like a river, kept me company. The dogs lay curled by the hearth, their breathing soft and steady, a rare moment of peace in a house that always felt on edge. We noticed the firewood pile was dwindling, the flames in the hearth growing weak. We had to go outside, into the frozen, dark, where the snow whispered secrets I didn't want to hear. Dad stumbled to his feet, his balance shaky, so I took the lead, bundling up in my coat and boots, the cold biting at my fingers as we stepped into the storm. The snow was still falling, lighter now, but the fog had rolled in, thick and heavy, wrapping the world in a suffocating shroud. Beyond our house, up the hill, loomed the funeral home, its silhouette a grim sentinel against the snowy sky. A retaining pond separated us from it, a dark mirror that kept our house from flooding during the rains. And in its parking lot, a few streetlights glowed faintly, their light swallowed by the mist. It was then, through the haze, that we saw it, a small shadow against the snow, no taller than a child standing alone. My heart stuttered as I squinted through the fog. The figure was tiny, maybe just over 4 feet, a child's outline against the white expanse. Who would let a kid out in this storm, at this hour? Dad and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that we couldn't ignore this. We trudged up, the hill, the snow crunching beneath our boots, my breath fogging in the air. The closer we got, the more wrong it felt. The boy, he couldn't have been more than 10 or 11, stood there, pale as the snow itself, his skin almost translucent, as if the cold had leached every drop of life from him. He wore only a thin nightgown, the fabric fluttering in the icy wind, his bare feet buried in the snow. His eyes, wide and hollow, locked onto mine, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. He was trembling, his small body racked with shivers, but he didn't speak, just stared at us with a fear so raw it made my chest ache. Dad snapped out of his drunken haze, his voice soft but firm as he told the boy to follow us. Couldn't leave him out here. He'd die in this cold. I nodded, reaching out a hand, but the boy flinched, stepping back as if my touch might burn him. Still, he gave a small nod when we promised to get him warm, maybe find him something to eat, and he trailed behind us as we led him down the hill. The snow seemed to part for him, as if the storm itself knew he didn't belong. We brought him through the back door into the laundry room, a cramped space that smelled of detergent and damp clothes. The moment he stepped inside, his shivering stopped, his fear melting away. His face lit up, a strange, serene calm washing over him, as if he'd finally found home. Dad and I turned to grab blankets, towels, anything to warm him up, our footsteps echoing in the quiet house. We were gone for less than a heartbeat, but when I turned back, he was gone. I'd meant to ask if he wanted soup, something to fill his frail frame, but the spot where he'd stood was empty, the air colder than before. It was as if he'd never been there at all. I grabbed Dad's arm, my fingers digging into his sleeve, and he spun around, his face draining of color, pale against his Cherokee features. We searched the room, the house, the yard, but there was nothing. No boy, no sign he'd ever existed. Outside, the snow lay untouched, our boot prints the only marks in the fresh powder. He'd been barefoot, but there were no footprints, no trace of him at all. We stood there, staring at each other, the silence heavier than the storm outside. Had we imagined him? Dad's eyes were clouded with doubt, wondering if the whiskey had played tricks on his mind, but I knew what I'd seen. I barely touched alcohol, and that boy had been real. Or had he? Over the next week and a half, we asked around, desperate for answers, describing the boy in his nightgown to anyone who'd listen. It wasn't until Dad spoke to Mrs. Thunderberg, a 96-year-old widow who'd lived in the area her whole life, that we got a sliver of clarity. Her voice trembled as she told us a story from her childhood, a tale older than she was. Long before the neighborhood was built, a boy had been found dead in a rare Georgia snowstorm, not far from our house. He'd been wearing nothing but a nightgown, his small body frozen in the drifts. No one knew how he'd ended up there. Some whispered of tragedy, others of cruelty, but his silhouette had been seen ever since, always in the worst snowstorms, always vanishing before anyone could get close. That boy had been alone for over a century, trapped in the cold. Dad and I pieced together what we could, guessing he'd been locked out during a blizzard, maybe the great one of 1899, maybe the storm of 1910. He'd been so frail, he wouldn't have lasted long in the freezing dark. But when we brought him inside, he'd vanished, as if the warmth of our house was all he'd ever wanted. 15 years have passed, and I still see his face in my dreams. Half frozen, scared, searching for something I couldn't give. No one else in the area has seen him since. Not the neighbors, not the old-timers who knew the stories. Sometimes, I wonder if we imagined him, a shared hallucination born of the storm. But then I remember his eyes, the way they softened when he stepped inside, and I know he was real. Did it really take 100 years for someone to care enough to let him in? If so, that's a tragedy I'll carry forever. Strangers don't always smile, and some know your name before you speak. I was 8, maybe 9, a chatterbox with no filter, oblivious to the warnings my mom drilled into me about talking to strangers. That night, she took me and my friend Lily to McDonald's, a rare treat that meant greasy fries and endless playtime in the indoor jungle gym. The restaurant was a neon-lit oasis, its plastic tables gleaming under harsh lights, the air thick with the smell of burgers and cleaning solution. It was late, the place nearly empty, save for the bored staff wiping counters and us giggling as we slid down colorful tubes. I felt invincible, wrapped in the warmth of childhood freedom. But something was watching, waiting for me to slip. The McDonald's, my safe haven, was about to become a trap I'd never forget. Lily and I were sprawled on the play area's padded floor, catching our breath after a game of tag. My mom and her friend chatted at a table nearby, their voices a distant hum. Then I saw him. A man sat alone at a table just outside the play area, his tray empty, his eyes fixed on nothing. He was older, maybe 30, with a sallow face and a faded jacket that hung loose on his frame. Something about him felt off, like he didn't belong in the bright, cheery McDonald's. Don't stare. He's just eating. But my curiosity won. I nudged Lily, and we scampered over, my mouth already running. "Hi, I'm me, and this is Lily. We go to Oakwood Elementary, and I love Pokemon." The words spilled out, reckless and proud. He didn't smile, just nodded, his eyes sharp like he was memorizing every word. Then he pulled out a phone. His voice, low and guttural, spoke in a language I didn't know, the sounds slithering through the air. "Walk away. Now." But I stood there, frozen as his gaze locked onto me. Back in the play area, Lily and I laughed off the weirdness, but a chill lingered. My mom's warnings echoed faintly, and I remembered a story she'd told me last year. A kid at a nearby mall had wandered off with a woman who'd known his name, his school, everything. The police found him just in time, but the woman vanished. Mom had hugged me tight, her voice shaking. Never trust someone who knows too much. I pushed the memory down, climbing the slide, but the man's phone call gnawed at me. Was he talking about us? Hours passed, the restaurant growing quieter, the lights harsher against the dark windows. Then the glass door swung open. A big man and a girl my age stepped in. She ran to the play area's glass wall, her face pressed against it, and shouted my name. "Hey, it's me!" Her voice was bright, but her eyes were wrong, too eager, too knowing. She rattled off my favorite Pokemon, my teacher's name, my street. How does she know? My stomach twisted, the play area's colors blurring into a sickly haze. The girl kept talking, her words a net closing around me. "Come outside. I've got a Pikachu card you'll love." Lily tugged my sleeve, unsure, but I was ready to follow. My child's trust blinding me. She knows me, she's my friend. But then I saw my mom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen. "Get over here now." She grabbed my arm, yanking me through the play area's exit, Lily stumbling behind. The big man was at the counter, watching us, his hand on his phone. My mom didn't speak, just dragged us to the car, her grip bruising. As we peeled out of the lot, I saw their car, a dark sedan, pull out behind us. They're following us. My mom weaved through side streets, her breath ragged, the headlights in the rear view like predators' eyes. The McDonald's, the play, area, the girl's voice. They burned into me, a scar of betrayal. They knew everything. We lost them after what felt like hours, the sedan vanishing into the night. Back home, I faced my mom's fury, her voice cracking as she explained. That was a kidnapping scheme. You told him everything. I didn't get it then. Why a girl my age would help, what they wanted. But the fear sank deep. I'd been a step away from vanishing. My trust a weapon turned against me. What if Mom hadn't seen? The question haunts me, looping through every quiet moment. I'm older now, but I check behind me in empty parking lots, flinch at strangers who smile too long. Was that girl real? Was she like me? The McDonald's is still there, its light still bright, but I'll never go back. Some nights I dream of her voice, calling my name, her eyes too old for her face, and I wake wondering if she's still out there, waiting for someone else to trust her. My childhood wasn't a home. It was a cage, and the bars were made of secrets I couldn't name. I don't remember much from before I was 13, just fragments, like shards of a mirror that cut when you try to piece them together. The police. Reports filled in some gaps, my family's hushed stories others. But there was always a void, a darkness where memories should have been. Have you ever felt like your own life is a story someone else wrote and you're just reading it? At 7, I started visiting a woman I called Auntie. No first name, no last, just Auntie. A title that felt warm, safe, like a blanket on a cold night. But blankets can hide things, and I was too young to know what lurked beneath. Her house was a short drive from ours. A squat little place with peeling paint and windows that seemed to watch you back. I'd sit in her living room, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and lavender, while she typed every word I said into her laptop. Feel the weight of someone listening too closely, their eyes peeling back your skin. Her smile was soft, her voice gentle, and I poured out my heart, my fears, my dreams. The way my mother's words could sting like a slap. I thought she was helping me, thought she cared. Trust is a fragile thing, isn't it? One crack and it shatters. By 14, the cracks were showing. You ever wake up one day and realize the people you trust might be lying to you? I'd spent years telling Auntie everything. How I'd tried to end my pain. How my mother's anger was a storm I couldn't escape. How I felt like a ghost in my own life. But nothing changed. The sessions didn't help, and her questions started to feel like traps. Listen closely now. She'd ask about my darkest moments, then brush them off, defending my mother like she was the victim. I'd leave her house feeling smaller, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. When I was 16, I was a mess. Sneaking out to parties, drinking whatever was handed to me, chasing anything to drown the noise in my head. Auntie's questions got sharper, more specific. How do you know about that? I'd think, my stomach twisting as she asked about the parties, the drinks, the nights I barely remembered. She'd sit there, her fingers hovering over the keys, her eyes like needles pinning me in place. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just knew me too well after a decade. But what if knowing someone is just another way to control them? One night, I hit my breaking point. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall might kill you. But staying still feels worse. I was rummaging through my mother's room, desperate for something. Pills, answers, anything to stop the pain. Her walk-in closet was a place I rarely went. A dark cave of forgotten things. Under a pile of clothes, I found a suitcase, new and out of place. Hold your breath for a moment. Picture opening a door you were never meant to touch. Inside were stacks of papers, pages upon pages of my words, my secrets, typed out like a script. Every session with Auntie, Every confession was there. Dating. Back to when I was 7. My life stolen and laid bare. I sat on the floor, my hands shaking, reading my own pain like it was someone else's story. You ever feel your world turn inside out? Like the ground's been pulled from under you? I stole a few pages, careful to hide my tracks, and spent nights poring over them. The words were mine, but they felt foreign, weaponized. I started watching Auntie closer, noting the way her smile never reached her eyes, the way her questions seemed to know too much. I asked my mother about her, but she'd snap, "She's a psychologist, that's all you need to know." Why was she hiding her? I had to know the truth. Take a deep breath and step into my shoes. One day, while my mother was in the shower, I grabbed her phone and ran. I was on a bus, my heart pounding, scrolling through her messages. I found Auntie's name, not Auntie, but a real name, unfamiliar yet chillingly familiar. They texted about my sessions, about me like I was a project, not a person. I dug deeper, checking call logs. Hours of calls, far too many for a simple therapist. What kind of therapist needs to talk to your mother that much? I searched her name on social media, my fingers trembling. Nothing. Until I found her profile, hidden under a fake name with photos of her and my mother, laughing together. Years before I was born, they'd been friends my whole life. The realization hit like a punch. Auntie wasn't a therapist. She was my mother's ally, her spy. Every secret I'd shared, every tear, had been fed back to my mother, twisted into tools to control me. Feel the betrayal sink into your bones, cold and heavy. I went home that night, knowing I'd face hell. My mother's rage was a storm, fists, screams, a punishment I didn't deserve. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the truth. The 2 women I'd trusted most had built a cage around me, and I'd helped them lock the door. I left home as soon as I could at 18, crashing with a friend who saw the scars I couldn't hide. You ever start over and realize the past is still chasing you? Years later, clearing out my Instagram, I froze. Her username, Auntie's, stared back at me from my followers. She'd been watching me even now, her bio claiming she was a chemistry teacher, not a psychologist. Imagine those eyes, the ones that pinned you down for a decade, staring through a screen. I cried that night, not just for the years lost, but for the realization that my childhood had been stolen piece by piece by the people who should have protected me. I'm in therapy now, real therapy, with a psychologist I vetted like my life depended on it. Sit with me for a moment. My new therapist smiled when I blurted out my story, saying, "We've got work to do." And we do. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone. If you've ever felt like your trust was a weapon used against you, listen to this. There are others out there carrying stories like mine, and we're finding our way out, one truth at a time. But what if the people you love are the ones you should fear most? The night was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched from the shadows. I was 16, far from London's crowded streets, standing in my best friend's grandfather's house in rural Ireland, a place so isolated it felt like the edge of the world. The house sat alone, backed by a dense forest and facing a glassy lake that reflected the stars like a mirror to another realm. My best friend and I had the place to ourselves, a rare treat while her family, her granddad, dad, brother, and aunt were off at the pub. We thought we were safe, playing house in a fortress of stone and wood, until a knock at the door shattered that illusion. Ireland was her dad's homeland, and every summer, she'd vanish to this remote corner of the world. That year, I'd tagged along, eager for a break from city life. The house was beautiful in a haunting way, old stone walls, ivy crawling up the sides, windows that rattled in the wind. Step into a place where time feels stuck, where every shadow holds a story. We'd spent the day exploring, laughing as we raced across the fields, the lake's cool breeze tangling our hair. But when her family left for the pub, promising a quick pint, we were thrilled to have the house to ourselves. We planned a cozy night. Popcorn, a movie, maybe some gossip under the glow of fairy lights we'd strung across the living room. The forest loomed outside, its trees whispering secrets. But inside we felt untouchable, wrapped in the warmth of our teenage invincibility. Then came the knock. It was sharp, deliberate, cutting through the movie's dialogue like a blade. My best friend paused the TV, her eyes meeting mine, a flicker of confusion passing between us. Feel that moment when your heart stumbles, when the ordinary becomes a threat. We figured her family had forgotten their keys. Typical, we laughed, rolling our eyes as we headed to the conservatory, a glass-walled room that led to the front door. But when we peered through the glass, it wasn't her granddad or dad. A man stood there, his face half hidden in shadow, his eyes glinting with a strange, feverish alertness. He was tall, disheveled, his clothes rumpled as if he'd been wandering for hours. His voice was calm but insistent, claiming his car had broken down 30 minutes away and he needed to use our landline. Something about him felt wrong, like a note played out of tune. I glanced outside, squinting into the darkness, but saw no car, no headlights, nothing but the forest's black silhouette. "Where's your car?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He repeated his story, unfazed, but his eyes kept darting past us into the house, as if searching for something, or someone. My best friend offered her phone, holding it out through the barely cracked door, but he ignored it, his tone shifting, more demanding. "Is there an adult here?" he asked, his words dripping with a false concern that made my skin crawl. Imagine, standing on the edge of safety, with danger pressing closer, testing your defenses. We lied, saying her family would be back any minute, but he didn't budge. He insisted on the landline, his voice rising, his body leaning toward the door. My best friend's hand tightened on the knob, and with a shared glance we slammed the door shut, locking it with a heavy thud. We bolted the main house door for good measure, our breaths ragged, our laughter gone. Fear took root in the silence that followed. We retreated to the living room, crouching by the window, peering through the blinds. He was still there, pacing, the conservatory's edge, his silhouette a dark smear against the glass. Time stretched, each second heavy with dread, as we waited for him to leave. We debated calling her Dad, but the pub was loud, and 30 minutes had passed without a sound from outside. We convinced ourselves he'd gone, but the unease lingered, a weight in our chests. Her dog, a scruffy terrier, grew restless, whining, and pawing at the back door. Her barks were a warning, sharp and urgent, slicing through the night. We led her into the garden, thinking she'd spotted a goat, as she often did, but her barks turned frantic, echoing from the darkness, and we called her back, her fur bristling as she pressed against our legs. I thought it was over, but the house had other plans. I went to the kitchen for water. The back door just steps away, its old wood weathered and frail. Then I heard it, a rattle, a shake, like someone testing the handle. My blood froze, my glass slipping in my hand. The rattling grew violent, the jigger shuddering under a force that felt desperate, determined. Run, hide, scream. My mind spun, but my body was rooted, trapped in a nightmare. My best friend raced downstairs, her face pale, and shouted that she'd call the police, her voice trembling but fierce. The banging stopped, footsteps retreating into the night, fading until the silence was deafening. We stood frozen, clutching each other, until the front door opened. We thought we were done for, our hearts in our throats, until her dad's voice called out, warm and familiar. Relief flooded us, but it was tainted by fear. We were safe, but the night had marked us. We spilled the story to her family, frantic, asking if they'd seen a broken-down car. They hadn't, nothing on the road, no lights, no signs. Her dad and brother searched the property, flashlights cutting through the dark, but found no trace of him. He'd vanished, like a ghost with bad intentions. We slept with the lights on that night, the forest outside no longer beautiful but menacing, its shadows hiding threats we couldn't name. Close your eyes and feel it. A stranger at your door, testing the locks, wanting in. I never felt safe in that house again, and even now, years later, I check my doors twice, haunted by the man who came too close. At 13, I thought a school camping trip would be an adventure, but the forest had other plans. Something watched me from the dark. It was a chilly autumn when my class set off for a campsite deep in a forest so dense, the sunlight barely touched the ground. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, heavy with the kind of stillness that made every rustle feel like a warning. Our campsite was a scattering of small tents, each one barely big enough for the 12 kids crammed inside, the canvas walls thin against the looming trees. I should have known something was wrong the moment I arrived. The forest felt alive, and not in a good way. During the day, I threw myself into the activities trying to ignore the unease. We built a rickety boat that barely floated, kicked a football around until our shoes were caked with mud, and gathered around a crackling campfire to roast marshmallows, the sweet smell mixing with the smoke as laughter filled the air. When night fell, I picked the bed at the back of our tent, a cramped corner where the shadows seemed to cling a little too tightly. I unzipped my suitcase, expecting to find my pajamas, but realized I'd forgotten them in my rush to pack. The forest pressed closer as I settled into my sleeping bag, still in my jeans and hoodie, the air inside the tent growing colder with every passing hour. I drifted off eventually, the murmurs of the other kids fading into a distant hum, my body sinking into the hard ground. But then in the dead of night, a deep guttural rumble tore me from sleep like the earth itself was growling. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding as I turned slowly, the darkness so thick I could barely make out the shapes around me. There, hunched over my suitcase, were two tall figures, their long limbs bent at unnatural angles, searching through my things. I reached out, my arm trembling and my fingers brushed against something rough like splintered old wood, cold and unyielding. "What are you?" I whispered. But before I could process the answer, my vision blurred, and I slipped into a void, consciousness slipping away like a stone into deep water. Morning came with a jolt, my phone alarm blaring, a sound that shouldn't have been there. We weren't allowed phones, and I'd sworn I turned it off. Confusion gripped me as I fumbled to silence it, the noise waking half the tent. The other kids grumbled, asking whose phone it was, but I pretended to be asleep, my mind racing with questions. How had it turned on? Who had touched it? I knew it wasn't the others. I hadn't told them about my phone, and they didn't. Seemed like the type to play pranks. We were supposed to wake up around then anyway, so I slipped out of the tent, the morning air biting at my skin. I needed to clear my head, but the forest had more secrets waiting. After relieving myself behind some bushes, I turned to head back and froze. A dead rabbit lay just outside my sleeping spot, its body mangled, blood staining the frost-covered ground. Something had killed it. Something close. I called for the teacher, my voice shaky, and he dismissed it as an animal attack, offering to have staff clean it up. But as I stared at the rabbit, I couldn't shake the feeling that those creatures from the night before were watching, waiting. The day passed. In a haze, my body curled in my sleeping bag as I munched on candy, replaying the night over and over. What had I touched? What had touched me? The other kids went about their activities, their laughter a distant echo, but I couldn't join them. My thoughts consumed by the memory of those tall wooden figures. As dusk fell, we gathered around the campfire again, roasting marshmallows that stuck to my fingers, their sweetness lost on me. The pasta we ate for dinner was cold and stale, but I forced it down, hunger outweighing the taste. An hour later, the teacher's warning echoed in my mind. Don't go to the bathroom alone at night, the forest is dangerous. I didn't think much of it at the time, pairing up with another kid just to be safe. But as I settled into bed, the weight of the day pressed down on me. Sleep came quickly, but it didn't last. My bladder woke me, an urgent pull I couldn't ignore. I nudged my partner, whispering for him to come with me, but he groaned and turned away, leaving me alone. I had no choice. I had to go. Stepping out of the tent, I woke a few kids, their sleepy protests fading as I ventured into the dark. The forest was a void, so cold and black I could barely see my own hands. My breath fogged in the air as I stumbled. Toward the benches, my eyes straining against the shadows. And then I saw it. Tall, looming. Its wooden form holding something small, something that looked like an animal. My heart stopped, my body rooted to the spot as its eyeless gaze seemed to pierce through me. For 20 agonizing seconds I stared, waiting for it to move, to lunge, but it didn't. I forced myself to keep walking, my legs trembling as I reached the toilet block, the door creaking as I slipped inside. I did what I needed to, washed my hands in the icy water and stepped back out, my pulse still racing. The benches were empty now, the creature gone, as if it had never been there. No one else saw it, not the other kids, not the teachers. Was I losing my mind? I still don't know what it was, but the memory of its wooden touch, the dead rabbit and that second sighting haunt me. Something in that forest knew I was there, and I'll never go back to find out what. Some games invite darkness, and once it's inside, it never leaves. I was 18, caught in the restless haze of youth, my nights a mix of rebellion and curiosity. Sleep paralysis had haunted me since I was 13, trapping me in my body as a shadow, hovered in the mirror, faceless but heavy with intent. Those episodes faded over time, becoming a grim memory I buried. But last weekend, I stirred something worse, something that didn't just watch, it spoke. My boyfriend and I were visiting his friend in a nowhere town, the kind where streetlights flicker and houses sag under forgotten stories. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, the silence broken only by distant coyotes. I knew fear, but I was wrong. That night, a Ouija board would open a door I couldn't close. We crashed at his friend's place, a ramshackle house with peeling paint and creaky floors. The living room was a mess of empty beer cans and mismatched furniture, lit by a single lamp that buzzed like a dying insect. My boyfriend, restless, pulled out my Ouija board, a dusty relic I'd bought on a whim but never used. "It's just a game," he said, grinning. But his friend's face tightened. He knows something. Over cheap whiskey, his friend shared a story. Years ago, his cousin had played Ouija in this town, asking who was there. The board spelled leave, and that night she woke frozen, a figure with glowing eyes whispering her name. She moved away, never the same. "Don't mess with it," he warned. But we laughed, the alcohol dulling our fear. We're smarter than that. The board sat on the coffee table, its letters stark under the lamp, daring us to try. Midnight came, and we headed to the train tracks near a ghost town, the kind of place where shadows feel alive. The air was cold, the gravel crunching under our boots, the stars swallowed by clouds. This is a mistake. We set the board on a flat rock, my boyfriend's friend and I placing trembling fingers on the planchette. My boyfriend watched, skeptical but tense. I asked, "Is anyone here?" The planchette jerked, spelling GEO. Get out. My heart lurched, the air turning thick like breathing syrup. Stop moving it, I snapped. But his friend's eyes were wide, his hands shaking. We tried to say goodbye, but the planchette skidded to no, then stopped dead. Something's here. We scrambled back to the house, the board left behind, its letters burned into my mind. The night felt wrong, the darkness pressing closer, watching. Back, home alone in my apartment, I couldn't shake the board's message. GEO. Get out. I prayed before bed, a habit from childhood, but sleep pulled me under mid-sentence. Then I woke, or didn't. My body was lead, my eyes locked on the ceiling. The room was wrong, the shadows too deep, the air heavy with a sour metallic tang. It's happening again. A shape loomed at my bedside, the same shadow from my teens, but now it had eyes. Red, glowing, boring into me. Don't move. Don't scream. It leaned closer, its breath cold and rancid, brushing my face like spider webs. I thrashed in my mind, begging my limbs to move, but they stayed stone. The figure's eyes pulsed, a silent promise of something worse. You invited me. I woke gasping, the room normal, but the air still carried that sour stench. The next night I prayed harder, clutching my blanket like a shield. Don't sleep. Stay awake. But exhaustion won. The paralysis hit again, fiercer. The room a void, of black and gray. The figure was back, closer, its eyes now inches from mine, red and endless. It spoke, a voice like gravel and static scraping my mind. You called me, I stay. No, no, no. I fought my thoughts a scream, kicking against the invisible chains. It leaned to my ear, its breath a frozen blade. You're mine forever. Let me go. In desperation I bargained, my mind pleading, if you let me wake, you can come back tomorrow. The words felt wrong, a deal with something I didn't understand. The figure stilled, then vanished. I woke sobbing, the room too quiet, the promise hanging like a curse. What did I do? I told my boyfriend, my voice shaking. He suggested night terrors, but his own nightmares since that night, vivid, relentless, made him doubt. It's not just me. I haven't slept right since, terrified of what I invited. Is it still here, waiting for my promise? The Ouija board is gone, but its shadow lingers in every creak, every flicker of light. I see those red eyes in my dreams, hear that voice in the silence. Was it real? Is it coming back? I'm scared to close my eyes, scared to pray, scared that tomorrow night it'll keep its word. Some doors once opened never close, and I'm trapped on the threshold, waiting for the dark to claim me. The forest didn't sleep at night. It watched, its shadows curling like fingers around anyone foolish enough to wander in. A few weeks ago, I set out for my favorite clearing, a hilltop where the stars felt close enough to touch. The night was warm, the air thick with summer's breath, but the darkness was absolute, a blanket that swallowed everything beyond my reach. Have you ever walked alone and felt the world holding its breath, waiting for you to slip? I chose not to use a flashlight, letting my eyes adjust to the moonless void, drawn by the promise of silence and solitude. The path wound past an old farm, its sagging barns and empty fields a relic of some forgotten life. Feel the stillness of a place abandoned, where even the wind seems afraid to linger. I'd passed it countless times, always finding it lifeless. No animals, no lights, just decay. But that night a stench hit me, sharp and musky like a barn full of livestock left to rot. You ever smell something that shouldn't be there? something that makes your skin crawl. I scanned the darkness, expecting to see a stray cow or a coyote's glinting eyes, but the fields were empty. The smell hanging heavy, unnatural. My heart quickened, but I pressed on, telling myself it was nothing. The clearing was a sanctuary, a wide hill with a fire pit at its heart, embers still glowing faintly under ash. Picture yourself lying under a sky so vast it feels like it's pulling you in. I stacked leftover wood, coaxing the fire back to life, its warmth a fragile shield against the night. For hours I lay there, the stars my only company, their light cold and distant. The fire died slowly, and I let it, sinking. To the darkness, the world so quiet I could hear my own pulse. But silence can lie, can't it? Then out of nowhere it came. A crunch of gravel, deliberate and close, like boots on the road below. Listen closely now. My breath caught, my body tensing as the sound grew louder, a steady rhythm moving toward me. You ever hear something and know it's not just chance, that it's meant for you? The fire was dead, the moon too dim to help, so I lay still, tracking the steps by sound alone. They passed the clearing heading toward town, and I stood, my curiosity outweighing my fear. Follow it, I thought. Find out who's out here. I stepped onto the road, my sneakers soft against the gravel, matching the stranger's pace. The footsteps were clear, each one a pulse in the night, but something felt off. Feel the air grow heavier, like it's pressing against your chest. I kept my distance, expecting to see a figure, a hiker, a local, anyone. But the road stretched empty before me. My own steps echoed, blending with theirs, until, without warning, they stopped, just stopped. No rustle of leaves, no snap of twigs, no sign of anyone stepping off the path. Imagine a sound vanishing like it was never there, and the silence that follows is worse. I froze, my heart pounding, straining to hear anything. A breath, a movement, nothing. The forest was a void, swallowing every trace of life. I waited, minutes stretching into eternity, staring into the dark. You ever stand somewhere and feel like you're not alone, even when you should be? I started walking again, passing the farm. Its stench gone now, replaced by a chill that sank into my bones. I turned back, half expecting a figure to emerge, but the road was empty, the night mocking my fear. What if they heard me following? What if they stopped because they knew? The thought clawed at me, and I hurried home, the darkness pressing, closer with every step. The next day I returned, the sunlight stripping the forest of its menace. Look at the ground now. My footprints were clear, pressed deep into the gravel, but there was nothing else. No other tracks, no sign of anyone else. How do you explain a sound that leaves no trace? I stood there, the clearing bright and ordinary, yet the memory of those steps lingered, sharp and real. Let me tell you a story I heard later, one that makes my skin crawl. An old man at the gas station, his hands gnarled from years of work, spoke of the forest in hushed tones. Decades ago, a traveler vanished on that road, his body never found. But locals swore they heard his steps on moonless nights, forever walking, forever lost. What if some things don't leave footprints because they don't need to? I haven't gone back to the clearing since. Lie still for a moment. Listen to the quiet around you. Sometimes in the dead of night I hear it, a faint crunch, like gravel under boots, just outside my window. What would you do if you heard it? Knowing. No one's there, knowing it's waiting for you to follow. Some nights, the world shows you something it shouldn't, something that lingers like a burn behind your eyes. This isn't my story, but it belongs to a friend, a girl I knew for years, whose voice trembled when she shared it. In 2004, she lived with her parents in a wooded corner of Ontario, Canada. where the trees stretched endlessly, their branches weaving a canopy that hid the stars. Their home was a quiet refuge, its backyard spilling into a garden of fruit trees, apple, cherry, pear, that bloomed with life but held secrets darker than the forest beyond. One night, a light moved among those trees and it changed her family forever. My friend's house was a place of warmth, with creaking floors and windows that framed the wilderness outside. Step into a home where the walls feel alive, where the sea. Night presses against the glass. The backyard was her father's pride, its fruit trees heavy with summer's bounty, but beyond them the forest loomed, dense and unyielding, a place where light seemed to vanish. She was a teenager then, carefree, unaware of the strangeness that could seep into ordinary nights. Her parents were ordinary too, her mom a gardener, her dad an office worker, far from the kind of man who'd chase ghosts. But that night, as he climbed the stairs to bed, something caught his eye. A flicker, a glow dancing among the fruit trees. It wasn't a flashlight. My friend told me how her dad froze, his hand on the banister staring out the window. Imagine a light that doesn't belong, floating 3 feet above the ground, weaving between branches like a living thing. It was bluish white, not bright but not dim, a soft pulse that seemed to hum with purpose. He called for her and her mom, his voice sharp with unease, and they joined him, crowding the window, their breaths fogging the glass. The light moved slowly, gliding between the trees, never touching the ground, never casting shadows. Feel that moment when wonder turns to dread, when the impossible becomes real. My friend's heart raced, her mind scrambling for explanations. Prank, a reflection, anything. But the light defied them all, its motion too fluid, too deliberate. Her dad, ever practical, decided to investigate. He thought it was a prowler, a thief with a flashlight, but deep down he knew it wasn't. He grabbed his coat, his jaw set, and stepped outside, the back door swinging shut behind him. My friend and her mom watched, their hands pressed against the window as he approached the garden. The light stopped as if it sensed him, and then it fled. It darted through the trees, swift and silent, vanishing into the thick forest beyond. My friend's breath caught, her mom's grip tightening on her arm. They urged him to come back, their voices thin against the night, and he did, his face pale, his eyes wide with something he couldn't name. Close your eyes and see it. A light that knows you're watching, a light that runs. They tried to sleep, to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, but her dad couldn't let it go. He stood by the window, mesmerized, as if the light had claimed him. My friend woke to his shouts at dawn, a sound that tore through the house like a blade. Her father was blind, his eyes useless, his voice raw with panic. They rushed him to the hospital, the car ride a blur of fear, her mom's hands shaking on the wheel. The doctor's diagnosis was chilling: retinal burns, the kind seen in welders who'd stared too long at an arc without protection. But her dad wasn't a welder, hadn't been near a flame. He sat in the sterile room, his face ashen, describing the light's return, how it drifted back to the garden after they'd gone to bed, how he'd watched it, unable to look away until it faded into the forest. Something had touched him, something beyond this world, and it left its mark. The blindness lasted days, a temporary curse that lifted slowly, but the mystery remained. No one could explain the light, not the doctor, not the neighbors, not the old stories of the forest. My friend's family never spoke of it again, as if silence could erase the fear. She told me this years later, her voice low, her eyes distant, as if the light still haunted her dreams. Recall a time you saw something you couldn't explain, something that changed the way you see the dark. I've lost touch with her now, but her story clings to me, a reminder that some things in this world don't belong, and some sights come at a cost. The light is still out there, waiting, and I wonder who it'll find next. Some houses don't just hold secrets, they guard them and they'll punish you for looking. I was 13, buzzing with the thrill of summer, tagging along with my dad and uncle as they worked on an old Victorian house in rural Connecticut. The place was a sprawling relic, its white paint peeling like dead skin, surrounded by acres of overgrown fields and a sagging shed where the forest began. My cousin, 11 and fearless, was my partner in crime, both of us obsessed with ghost stories and the supernatural. This house was our jackpot. Its built-in greenhouse and creaky floors promised adventure, but the moment we stepped inside, a chill settled over me, heavy and wrong. Something didn't want us here. The house was more than old. It was alive, and we were about to test its patience. The kitchen entrance greeted us with a musty smell, like damp earth and forgotten time. A basement door stood open, its black maw exhaling cold air that made my skin prickle. "Don't go down there." My cousin, undaunted, darted ahead, his sneakers echoing on the hardwood. I followed, my excitement warring with a growing dread. At school, we'd heard whispers about this house. A local kid swore his grandpa had worked here decades ago, quitting after seeing a shadow move in the attic. No face, just a shape that didn't belong. "People don't stay long," he'd said, his voice low. I'd laughed it off then, but now, standing in the foyer, the story clung to me. The house was too quiet, its high ceilings swallowing sound, the air thick with dust that stung my throat. "We shouldn't be here." My cousin's grin pulled me forward, but every step felt like defiance against something unseen. We explored the lower floors, poking through cobwebbed parlors and creaking staircases, but the attic called to us. "It's up there, waiting." The staircase to the attic was narrow, the wood groaning under our weight, the air growing colder with each step. My body resisted, a primal urge to turn back, but my cousin was relentless, his eyes bright with a hunger I didn't understand. The attic was surprisingly modern, renovated, with a small TV and boxes of junk, but it felt wrong, like a mask, over something rotten. Then he saw the door. A heavy wooden door, swollen shut, stood at the far end, its surface scarred with scratches that looked too deliberate. My cousin froze, his usual chatter gone, staring at it like it was alive. "We have to open it," he whispered, his voice not his own. The shift in him, still, focused, almost possessed, hit me like a shock. This isn't right. He grabbed the doorknob, yanking with a strength I didn't know he had. The door didn't budge, but he kept pulling, his breath sharp, his face pale. "Help me," he hissed, and I obeyed, my hands trembling as I gripped the knob. The wood was ice cold, burning my palms, and the air grew heavy, thick with a sour, rotting smell that made my stomach churn. Something's on the other side. We pulled together, the door groaning like a living thing, resisting us. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear, the attic's shadows twisting into shapes that weren't there. "Stop, run." But my cousin's desperation was contagious, his eyes wild, locked on the door. The TV flickered behind us, static hissing, though I swore it was off. This house is awake. Every nerve screamed to flee, but we kept pulling, defying the warning in the air. The door gave way with a crack, a gust of wind roaring through, cold and sharp, whipping our hair back. My cousin screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore through me. "He sees it." I stumbled, still clutching the knob, and scrambled to his side. His eyes were wide, fixed on the room beyond. A dark, unfinished attic strewn with splintered wood and dusty antiques. A grimy window let in slivers of light, but nothing moved. What did he see? My stomach lurched, a wave of nausea so intense I nearly collapsed. It's here. The air pulsed, heavy with a presence I couldn't name. The scratches on the door now glaring like warnings. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking, and grabbed my cousin, dragging him down the stairs, his screams echoing in my skull. Run. Don't stop. We burst into the yard, gasping, the house looming behind us, its windows like eyes watching. We collapsed in the grass, hearts pounding, the house silent but alive, its shadow stretching over us. My cousin wouldn't speak, his face pale, his eyes distant. "What did you see?" I asked, but he just shook his head, lips tight as if speaking would summon it again. He's never told me, not then, not now, years later. It's still up there. The house was sold eventually, but I've never gone back. The memory is a scar, sharp and raw. Was it real? Did we wake something? Every creak in my own home, every shadow in a corner, pulls me back to that door, those scratches, that gust of wind. Is it still waiting, locked behind that door? Some nights I dream of it opening, and I wake gasping, certain I hear my cousin scream, echoing from a house I'll never return to. I've lived in a house where the walls whispered secrets, but it wasn't until a late-night shower that I heard them for myself. When I was 2, my parents moved us into our childhood home, a creaky old place with peeling paint and a history that stretched back decades. My mother always swore there was a ghost lurking within its walls. She'd hear footsteps pacing the halls at night, or the faint clatter of silverware shifting in the kitchen when no one was there. I never believed. Her brushing it off as her imagination running wild, but deep down, I wondered if I was ignoring something real. I wasn't a complete skeptic of the paranormal, but her stories never felt tangible enough to make me care. Until a night a couple of years ago when I was a freshman in high school, that changed everything. I played on the school hockey team, and after a grueling late game, my dad and I didn't get home until around 10 p.m. The house was empty, its silence heavier than usual, as if it was holding its breath. My mom, a bartender, wouldn't be back until well past midnight, her shifts often stretching into the early hours. It was just me, Dad, and our little dog, a scrappy terrier who followed him everywhere. As soon as we stepped inside, Dad grabbed his cigar and headed to the backyard. A nightly ritual that left the scent of tobacco lingering in the air. I was exhausted, my muscles aching from the game, and all I wanted was a hot shower to wash away the day. I told him I'd be upstairs, and he nodded, already halfway out the door, the dog trotting at his heels. The house settled into its familiar quiet as I climbed the stairs, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight, each step echoing in the stillness. The bathroom was on the top floor, a small space with faded tiles and a shower that always took too long to heat up. I locked the door behind me, the click of the latch a false promise of safety, and stepped under the stream of water, letting the steam wrap around me. I'd been in there for maybe 5 minutes, the heat loosening the knots in my shoulders, when it happened. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks on the bathroom door, each one spaced a few seconds apart, loud enough to cut through the sound of the running water. My heart lurched, a cold jolt slicing through the warmth. I froze, the shampoo bottle slipping from my hand, and listened, straining for any sound. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling, assuming it was Dad checking on me. But there was nothing. No reply, no footsteps, just an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. This house was old, its creaks and groans a constant companion. I could hear the basement door open from up here or someone climbing the stairs outside the bathroom, but I'd heard nothing before or after those knocks. Maybe I imagined it, I told myself, though a flicker of fear lingered, a whisper of doubt I couldn't shake. I tried to push it aside, focusing on the water, the steam, the rhythm of my breathing. and continued my shower, hoping to forget. 2 minutes later, it happened again. 3 knocks, identical to the first, as if someone had recorded the sound and played it back. The air in the bathroom thickened, the steam turning suffocating, and this time, I couldn't pretend it was nothing. My pulse raced, a frantic drumbeat in my chest, and I shouted, "Is anyone there?" My voice cracked, echoing off the tiles, but the house stayed silent, mocking my fear. I had to know, had to see for myself. With the shower still running, I stepped out, water dripping onto the floor, and yanked the door open, half expecting to see Dad standing there. But the hallway was empty, the darkness stretching down the stairs like a gaping maw. I checked the rooms upstairs, my bedroom, my parents' room, the spare closet, my wet footprints leaving a trail on the hardwood. But there was no one. I peered out my bedroom window, the glass fogging with my breath, and saw Dad sitting in the backyard, the glow of his cigar a faint beacon in the night. He hadn't moved, hadn't come inside. I told myself to finish the shower and get out, to escape the bathroom as quickly as I could. But as I stepped back under the water, the knocks came again, 3 times, sharp and unrelenting. I was done. Terror clawed at me, a raw, primal fear that turned my legs to jelly. I shut off the shower, the sudden silence deafening, and threw the door open again, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Nothing. No one, just the house staring back at me, its shadows deeper than before. I wrapped a towel around myself and ran downstairs, the cold air biting at my damp skin, and burst into the backyard. "Dad, did you come inside?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up, confused, the cigar still in his hand, and shook his head. "No, I've been out here the whole time," he said, and I believed him. I'd have heard him if he'd come in. The house's creaks would have given him away. That was the moment I knew. Something else was in our house, something that had been waiting. It was the most terrifying experience I'd ever had in that place. The first time I truly believed Mom's ghost stories. Those knocks weren't human, and they'd chosen me to hear them. A few months later, the house reminded me it wasn't done. I was in bed past midnight, the glow of my phone the only light in the room, when a single, sharp knock jolted me upright. I'd just finished chatting with friends, my parents asleep 2 rooms away on the second floor. The house wrapped in a stillness that felt alive. My bed was pressed against 2 windows, the glass cold against my back, the bedroom door on the other side. The knock came from the window above my head, a sound so distinct it felt like a summons. I sat up, heart pounding, and peered into the darkness outside. But the night was too thick, too black to reveal anything. 1 knock, that was all. But it was enough. Nothing else happened that night, but the memory of those sounds, the 3 in the bathroom, the 1 at my window, clung to me like a shadow. I moved out of that house 2 years ago, desperate to leave its secrets behind, and since then, nothing like that has happened again. But I still hear echoes of those knocks in my dreams, and I wonder if whatever was there is still waiting, listening for me to come back. The forest in Montana didn't just surround you, it consumed you. Its darkness a living thing that whispered your fears back to you. Last summer, my family pitched our tents at Beaver Creek Campground, a quiet spot near Yellowstone where the trees stood like silent sentinels. It was our first night, and the air was heavy with the scent of pine and earth. Have you ever sat by a fire and felt the night watching you, waiting for you to look away? My mother, stepfather, and his brother had retreated to their tents by midnight, leaving me alone by the dying fire, its embers glowing like eyes in the dark. I lingered, the crackle of the flames my only company, the stars above sharp and cold. Picture yourself in a place so vast, so quiet, that your own heartbeat feels like an intrusion. The forest was still, but not peaceful. It was the kind of stillness that made you strain to hear something, anything. I doused the fire, the smoke, curling into the night and crawled into my tent, zipping it shut against the unknown. But what do you do when the unknown finds you anyway? I lay there, the canvas walls thin and fragile, my breath loud in the silence. Then it started, a soft sniffing sound right outside my tent like an animal circling, searching. Listen closely now. My heart lurched, my body frozen as I pictured a bear, its massive form lurking just beyond the fabric. Feel the cold sweat on your skin, the kind that tells you danger is close. The sniffing grew louder, more deliberate, and then came footsteps, slow, heavy, circling the campsite. I held my breath, straining to identify the sound. You ever hear something and pray, it's just your mind playing tricks? The steps paused, replaced by a faint dragging like a stick scraped across the ground. Circling, circling, never stopping. I thought of a stray dog, maybe a camper's pet gone loose, but the rhythm was wrong. Too purposeful, too aware. The night grew heavier, the air thick with dread. Close your eyes and imagine a light piercing the dark, uninvited. A sudden flash, bright, blinding, lit up the tent, like a camera capturing me in its lens. My blood ran cold, my mind screaming that something was out there watching, waiting. I stayed still, my pulse hammering as the sniffing returned. Closer now, right at the corner of my tent. Feel the fabric shift, just slightly, as if something's pressing against it. My hand hovered over the zipper, trembling, as I sensed a presence, animal, human, or something else, leaning into the canvas, testing its strength. What if it knows I'm here? What if it wants in? I couldn't take it anymore. Run, scream, do something. Who's there? I shouted, my voice cracking, shattering the silence. The sniffing stopped. The presence vanished, leaving only the echo of my words. My stepfather stirred, his voice groggy but alert, calling out as he grabbed his gun. 10 seconds. Count them. I waited, paralyzed, until I heard him outside, his boots crunching on the ground. I unzipped the tent, my hands shaking, and stumbled. Do you look around now? The campsite was empty, no tracks, no signs, nothing. Even my mother's dog, curled up in their tent, hadn't made a sound, as if the night had swallowed the danger whole. You ever hear a story that makes you question what you saw? A ranger, days later, told us about Beaver Creek. Whispers of campers hearing steps, seeing lights, feeling touches in the dark. Some said it was a spirit tied to the land, drawn to the living. What if some things don't need to be seen to be real? I slept in the car the next 2 nights, the forest's gaze never leaving me. Lie still tonight. Listen to the quiet. Sometimes, I hear it again, a faint sniff, a step just beyond my reach. What would you do if it came for you knowing it's already watching? In the dead of night, some houses reveal truths you're not meant to see. Truths that wear the faces of those you trust. It was 2019, and I was in my sister's new home. A place still heavy with the scent of fresh paint and unpacked boxes. She'd just moved in, and I'd brought my friend Anna to spend the night. A small celebration of her new chapter. We were in the guest room, a square space with a single bed and a trundle beneath where Anna slept. I was on the bed above, a light sleeper in unfamiliar places, my senses sharp against the quiet. At 2:40 a.m., something woke me, and what I saw still haunts my dreams. My sister's house was a blank slate, its walls bare, its floors echoing with every step. Step into a home that feels like a stranger, where every shadow seems to watch. The guest room was simple, with a single window draped in tulle curtains that let moonlight seep through. casting soft, ghostly patterns on the floor. Anna and I had laughed earlier, sprawled on the bed, sharing stories of old sleepovers. Her freckled face bright with mischief. She'd taken the trundle, insisting I have the bed, and we'd fallen asleep to the hum of a distant car on the driveway. Outside, I'm a light sleeper in new places, always attuned to the smallest shifts. The creak of a settling house, the rustle of leaves against glass. But this was different. A presence, heavy and wrong, pressing against my skin. I opened my eyes and the world tilted. The room was bathed in moonlight, the tulle curtains glowing faintly, but something was off. Feel that moment when your heart knows before your mind. When reality frays at the edges. Anna was standing by the window, her back to me, her body rigid, arms limp at her sides. Her silhouette was stark, her hair catching the silver light. But she was too still, like a statue carved from shadow. She was 4 inches from the glass, staring into the night as if it stared back. I propped myself up on my elbow, my pulse quickening, and whispered, "Anna, what are you doing?" No answer. The silence was thick, suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of my own breath. I tried again, louder. "Anna, what are you doing?" "Who?" The voice was hers, but not hers, low and flat, a hollow echo that sent ice down my spine. Imagine hearing a friend speak, but the words belonged to something else. I repeated her name, my voice trembling now, and again came that single word, "Who?" My eyes traced her form, her freckles visible in the moonlight, every detail perfect. Too perfect. Then I looked down. Anna was there on the trundle, her chest rising and falling, her face slack in sleep. The room spun, my stomach lurching as I realized the truth. The thing at the window wasn't Anna. It was wearing her face, her body, but it was wrong, a mockery of life. I called her name one last time, and it turned. Its head snapped toward me faster than human, its eyes locking onto mine. Empty, cold voids where warmth should have been. Time stopped, trapping me in a nightmare where fear is the only truth. I screamed, hurling myself against the wall, my shout a raw burst of terror. The bed shook and Anna, the real Anna, stirred, muttering, "What are you doing?" I looked down at her, then back to the window, my heart hammering. The thing was gone, vanished like smoke, leaving only the tulle curtains swaying faintly. I stammered out what I'd seen, my voice breaking as I stumbled to the window, shutting the curtains with shaking hands. The clock read 2:40 a.m., the numbers searing into my mind, a marker of the moment reality broke. Anna didn't want to hear it, her face pale as I reenacted the scene, pointing to where her double had stood. She didn't want to know something, had stolen her face, had stood inches from her sleeping body. We sat in silence, the room no longer a refuge but a stage for something sinister. Recall a time you saw something impossible, something that made you question what's real. I've never slept alone in that house again. My sister's new home now tainted by a presence I can't explain. Those eyes, empty and cold, follow me still. A reminder that some things can wear our skin and walk among us. I want to know what was, but I'm terrified it might return, seeking me or Anna again. Close your eyes and pray you never see your own face staring back from the dark. In the dead of night, I saw my friend standing by the window, but the real horror was realizing she was still asleep beside me. It was 2019, and my sister had just bought a new house, a quaint little place with fresh paint and creaky floors, still unfamiliar to all of us. I'd been eager to spend the first night there, to help her settle in, so I invited my friend Anna to join me in the guest room. The room was simple, a square space with a single bed, and a trundle bed tucked beneath it, the kind that rolls out. To save space, I took the single bed, leaving Anna to sleep on the trundle below, our bed so close I could hear her soft breathing in the dark. The room felt safe, cozy even, but there was a strangeness to it, a quiet that seemed to hum with something I couldn't name. A single window overlooked the driveway, its tulle curtains letting in just enough moonlight to cast faint shadows across the walls, the kind of light that blurs the edges of reality. I didn't think much of it then, but as I drifted off, the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. I've always been a light sleeper in new places, my senses on edge, alert to every unfamiliar sound. That night, at 2:40 a.m., I woke with a jolt, a heavy presence pressing down on the room as if the air itself had grown eyes. My heart thudded as I opened my eyes, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, painting the room in shades of silver and shadow. There, standing by the window, was Anna, or so I thought. She stood unnaturally still, her face inches from the glass, the curtains half open as if she'd been peering into the night. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides, her posture so rigid, sent a chill through me, like she was a statue carved from ice. The moonlight caught her freckles, the ones I knew so well. But something was wrong. Her stillness felt like a predator waiting for prey. I propped myself up on my elbow, the bed creaking beneath me, and blinked to clear the sleep from my eyes. She looked so real, so familiar that I didn't feel afraid. Not yet. "Anna, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice soft, expecting her to turn and laugh, to say she couldn't sleep. But she didn't move, didn't answer, just stood there, her gaze fixed on something I couldn't see. I tried again, a little louder. "Anna, what are you doing?" Her head tilted slightly, and then she spoke, her voice flat and hollow, a low, feminine tone that didn't sound like her at all. "Who?" The word hung in the air, heavy and wrong, sending a shiver down my spine. I frowned, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. "Anna, what are you doing?" I repeated, my voice trembling now, a flicker of unease creeping in. "Who?" she said again, the same lifeless tone, and that's when the fear took hold. My stomach twisted, a cold dread washing over me as I stared at her, the uncanny valley effect hitting me like a wave. Her face was Anna's, but it wasn't. Something about her felt hollow, like a mask stretched over nothing. My eyes darted down to the trundle bed, and my breath caught in my throat. Anna, the real Anna, was still there, asleep, her chest rising and falling, her face peaceful in the moonlight. I was staring at Anna sleeping while something else, something wearing her face, stood right beside her. My heart slammed against my ribs. A scream trapped in my chest as the truth crashed over me. This wasn't my friend. I looked back up, my voice barely a whisper. "Anna?" The thing snapped its head toward me, so fast it was unnatural, and our eyes locked. Hers were empty, cold, like twin voids that swallowed the light. I shouted, a raw, panicked cry escaping my lips as I threw myself against the wall, the bed, shaking beneath me. Those eyes, they weren't human, weren't Anna's, they were something else, something that didn't belong. The real Anna stirred at my shout, her voice groggy as she muttered, "What are you doing?" I glanced down at her, my pulse roaring in my ears. And when I looked back up, the fake Anna was gone, vanished as if she'd never been there. The room was empty, the curtains still, but the air felt heavy, tainted by whatever had stood there. I checked the time, 2:40 a.m., and stammered, "What was that?" My hands shook as I explained to Anna what I'd seen, reenacting the moment, pointing to the spot by the window where her doppelganger had stood. I pulled the curtains shut, desperate to block out the night, but Anna's face paled as I spoke. She doesn't like me bringing it up, and I understand why. Who would want to know something had worn their face, stood inches away watching? That thing had been identical to her, down to the freckles, but those eyes, I'll never forget them, so empty, so cold, like they'd seen beyond the world and found nothing worth seeing. I know what I saw, and it wasn't sleep paralysis. I was awake, alert, my mind sharp. I've never had mental health issues, never hallucinated. And back in 2009, I didn't even know about entities that could mimic loved ones. I'm a fan of the paranormal. But this wasn't thrilling. It was terrifying. I want to know what it was, to put a name to the thing that stole Anna's face. But at the same time, I pray it never comes back. Those eyes haunt me. A reminder that some things in the dark can wear the faces we trust most. I hope I never experience anything like that again. But every time I sleep in a new place, I check the shadows, half expecting to see her standing there, watching with those hollow, endless eyes. Some houses keep their dead, and some call your name to join them. I was 13, wide-eyed and restless, on a family vacation in Morocco that promised sun-soaked beaches and bustling markets. But instead of an apartment, my mom insisted we stay at my grandma's 70-year-old house, a weathered stone building that sagged under the weight of its own history. My siblings and I hesitated. Whispers of footsteps and voices in the house had reached us even across continents. But Mom brushed it off as childish nonsense. "Just stories," she said, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The house stood alone, its cracked walls baking under the desert sun, its shadows too deep for daylight. Something lingered here, and it knew we'd come. That first week I felt it watching, waiting for the right moment to speak. The house was a furnace, the air thick with heat that clung to our skin. By night, the indoors were unbearable, so we dragged mattresses to the rooftop, an open terrace, ringed by a low wall, the stars above our only roof. My brother fell asleep first, then my sister, their breaths soft against the hum of cicadas. Before bed, Grandma had pulled me aside, her voice low, telling me of a girl who'd lived here. Long ago, she was sad, lost, Grandma said, her eyes distant. They found her on this roof, gone by her own hand. I'd shivered, the story sinking into me, but exhaustion dulled my fear. It's just a tale. Now, lying under the vast Moroccan sky, the heat pressed down, the air heavy with jasmine and something sour like decay. Sleep. Don't think. But the house was awake, its whispers curling in the dark. I drifted into sleep, the stars blurring above. Then it came, a voice, soft, calling my name. It was gentle, almost tender, slicing through the silence like a blade. My eyes snapped open, heart thudding, the rooftop bathed in moonlight. Who's there? I sat up, scanning the shadows, my siblings still asleep, undisturbed. The voice came again, clearer, from the staircase leading to the terrace. Come here. My breath caught, the air suddenly cold, the jasmine scent gone, replaced by that sour decay. Don't move. It's a dream. But the voice felt real, personal, as if it knew me. I stood, legs trembling, and crept toward the stairs, the stone cool, under my bare feet. Just check, then go back. The night was too quiet, the cicadas silent, the house holding its breath. I leaned over the railing, peering into the stairwell's darkness. Then I saw her. A girl stood below, her white dress glowing, faintly, her face pale under the moonlight. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and empty, but it was her neck, impossibly long, stretching like a snake, bending at angles no human could survive, that froze me. She's not real, Her lips didn't move, but the voice came again. My name. Now sharp, insistent. The air thickened, heavy with that rotting smell, my throat burning as if I'd swallowed ash. Her head tilted, the neck creaking, and she took a step up, her bare feet silent on the stone. Run. Now. My heart slammed against my ribs, every nerve screaming, the rooftop shrinking around me, the stars too close, too bright. I stumbled back, tripping over a mattress, my breath ragged. She's coming. I scrambled to my siblings, shaking them, but they didn't wake, their faces peaceful, as if the house wanted only me. The stairwell was dark, but I felt her presence, a weight pressing my chest. Those eyes, that neck. I curled up beside my sister, pulling the blanket over my head, praying the voice would stop. It didn't call again, but the silence was worse, thick with anticipation, the sour smell lingering. She's still there. I didn't sleep, my eyes fixed on the stairwell, waiting for her to climb, her long neck swaying like a cobra. Dawn came, slow and merciless, but the fear stayed, burned into me. The next morning I told no one, the memory too raw, too impossible. But weeks later, back home, Grandma called. "Did you see her?" she asked, her voice trembling. She told me the truth. A 12-year-old girl had jumped from that rooftop decades ago, her spirit tied to the house, calling to those who listened. It was her. The word sank into me, confirming what I'd known. She wanted me. I've never returned to Morocco, but the house haunts me. Every creak, every shadow pulls me back to that rooftop. Those empty eyes, that unnatural neck. Is she still calling? Some nights I wake to my name, soft and distant, and I lie still, terrified that if I answer she'll find me again, waiting at the edge of the dark. The woods in Ohio didn't just grow, they hungered, their shadows swallowing secrets older than the trees themselves. It was the early 1990s, and I was parked in a quiet nature reserve, my truck facing a small fish pond, its surface still as glass under the fading light. My girlfriend sat beside me, her laughter soft as we talked, the radio humming low, weaving our words into the dusk. Have you ever felt a place shift, like it's waiting for you to notice its true face? The air was warm, thick with the buzz of mosquitoes, but the solitude was ours, until it wasn't. We'd been there for hours, watching the last cars leave, the park emptying as night crept in. Picture yourself in a bubble of safety, your world small and warm, unaware of what's circling just beyond. The woods to the west and south loomed dark, their edges blurring into the horizon. I turned off the engine, letting the radio run on battery, its faint glow our only light. We were lost in conversation, trading stories when a sound broke through. A low, rhythmic thump, distant but deliberate, coming from the trees. You ever hear something and feel your stomach drop, like you've stumbled into someone else's game? I hushed my girlfriend, my hand on the radio knob, straining to listen. Dogs barked faintly in the distance, but the thump faded, leaving only silence. Listen closely now. We brushed it off, blaming a deer or a falling branch, and sank back into our bubble. But minutes later, it came again. Stronger, closer. A steady beat that pulsed through the dark. Feel the air grow heavy, pressing against your chest. Warning. You to leave. I killed the radio, the silence deafening. My girlfriend's hand tight on mine. We waited, breath held, but the woods gave nothing away. I was ready to laugh it off, to start the truck and head to town when it hit. A sound so alien, so wrong, it froze my blood. Imagine a choir rising from nowhere, voices chanting words you can't grasp, surrounding you like a noose. It was everywhere. Above, below, behind. A cacophony of high, keening voices, layered over a drone like strings played on a warped organ. The words weren't English, weren't anything I knew, but they carried a weight, a menace that sank to my bones. The air vibrated, the truck trembling as if caught in a storm. You ever feel evil, not as a thought, but as a force pressing down, demanding you kneel? My girlfriend's nails dug into my palm, her eyes wide, reflecting my own terror. We were trapped, the chant closing in, promising something ancient, something hungry. Run, my mind screamed. But where? I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking, expecting to see robed figures circling us, their faces hidden in the dark. Look around you now. I slammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring as I flicked on the headlights. And then, nothing. The chant stopped, the air still, the woods empty under the harsh beams. No figures, no movement, just the pond glinting, innocently ahead. How do you escape something that vanishes when you look at it? My girlfriend's breath hitched, her voice barely a whisper. What was that? I didn't answer, just threw the truck into drive and sped south, the tires kicking up gravel, the night chasing us. Let me tell you a story I heard years later, one that keeps me awake. A local, his hands scarred from farm work, spoke of those woods in hushed tones. Long ago, before the park was built, settlers held rituals there, offerings to something they feared more than God. Some said the chants never stopped, just waited for the right ears to hear them. What if some sounds don't? Need a source because they're part of the land itself. I told a few friends the next day, but their skeptical laughs shut me up. I've kept it quiet since, the memory too raw, too real. Lie still tonight, listen to the quiet. Sometimes in the dark I hear it again. A faint hum, a whisper of voices calling from somewhere I can't see. What would you do if you heard? In knowing it's not just sound, but something alive, waiting for you to answer. Some houses hold shadows that speak with voices you love, luring you into their darkness. In 2019, I was 11, a wide-eyed kid visiting my grandparents' Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. The house was a relic, its towering gables and stained glass windows whispering of a century-long past. I'd always felt uneasy there, its halls too vast, its corners too dark. But that day, I was alone, glued to a Seahawks game on my tablet, unaware that the house had plans for me. At dusk, a voice called my name, and it sounded like my mom's, but it wasn't her. The mansion was a labyrinth of history, its floors creaking under the weight of forgotten lives. Step into a place where time feels trapped, where every doorway hides a secret. My grandparents lived there, their warmth a contrast to the house's cold grandeur. We'd arrived from Bellingham, Washington for a family visit, and the first day was perfect. Playing Clue with my grandparents, savoring a roast dinner, laughing as my dad recounted old stories. The house felt alive then, its shadows softened by our voices, but it had always unnerved me, especially alone. Its high ceilings and endless corridors making me feel small, watched. That afternoon, my parents, grandparents, and siblings went for a walk, leaving me in my third-floor bedroom, a haven with a window open to let out the muggy heat, a fan humming softly. I was lost in the game, the crowd's roar in my ears until a voice cut through it all. "Hey!" It was my mom, her tone sharp, annoyed, echoing from downstairs. Feel that moment when familiarity twists, when a voice you trust feels wrong. I paused, frowning, and turned off the fan to listen. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, heavy with expectation. She called again, my name clear, insistent, but muffled, like it came from underwater. I stood, irritation flaring. Why was she interrupting my game? I opened the door and yelled, "Yeah!" into the stillness, expecting her to answer. Nothing. The hallway stretched before me, its wallpaper faded, its shadows long in the fading light. I called again, louder. "Yeah!" Her voice returned, faint, beckoning. "Come here, I want to show you something." It came from below. Maybe the first floor, but it was off, distorted, like a recording played through a bad speaker. I descended, my sneakers soft on the carpet, my heart quickening. The second floor was empty, its rooms dark, their doors ajar like waiting mouths. "Mom, where are you?" I called, my voice echoing, unanswered. Imagine searching for someone you love, only to feel the house itself is hiding them. Her voice came again, here, closer now from the first floor. I hurried down, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the house was breathing. The living room, kitchen, dining room, all empty, their furniture looming like silent witnesses. Only the basement remained, its door at the end of a narrow hall. I froze, dread pooling in my gut as the door swung open, slow and deliberate, revealing a black void. No one was there, but footsteps echoed down the basement stairs, heavy, purposeful. "Here," the voice said again in my mom's tone, but wrong, so wrong. Panic clawed at me, urging me to run, but I couldn't. I turned, sprinting back toward the kitchen, my breath ragged when I stopped dead. At the top of the narrow staircase to the third floor stood a shadow, tall and human-shaped, but faceless, its form a void where features should be. It spoke, "Here," in my mom's voice, clear and cold, and my scream tore through the house. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, and ran, my feet pounding as I burst through the front door into the twilight. The world outside was safe, but the house's gaze followed me, heavy and hungry. I waited by the trees, my eyes darting to the windows, terrified I'd see that thing staring back. When my family returned, I spilled the story, tears streaming, my voice shaking. They listened, their faces soft with concern, but I saw doubt in their eyes. They said they believed me, but I knew they didn't, not fully. That night, I slept in my parents' room, the door locked, the lights on. The house was quiet, but its silence felt like a lie, a mask for whatever lived within its walls. Recall a time you felt truly alone, when the familiar turned alien and cruel. I never sleep alone in that house anymore. My visits rare, my steps cautious. The shadow's voice, my mom's but not, echoes in my dreams, a reminder that some things can steal what you love and wear it like a skin. I'm older now, but the fear remains, a scar from the day the house showed me its truth. Close your eyes and pray you never hear a loved one's voice from a mouth that isn't theirs. Last winter, a quiet walk by the 14 Locks Canal turned into a nightmare when something followed us through the dark. It was a frigid evening in early 2024, the kind where the air bites at your skin and the silence feels alive with unseen eyes. My partner and I had decided to take a walk along the 14 Locks Canal Centre in South Wales, a place we'd visited countless times before. The canal path stretched down a gentle hill, its waters still and black under the moonless sky, reflecting nothing but the weight of the night. We'd walked about 2/3 of the way when the darkness became unbearable, a heavy, miserable cold that seeped into our bones. The canal locks loomed ahead, their stone shapes barely visible, and we agreed. It was time to turn back, no sense lingering in this gloom. I suggested cutting through the woods, a shortcut to the car park, thinking it would be quicker, but the forest had other plans. A small footbridge led us into the wooded area, a narrow path winding through trees that seemed to lean in closer with every step. The darkness was absolute, a pitch-black void that swallowed the faint glow of our phone torches. My partner shivered beside me, her voice tight with frustration. as she complained she couldn't see a thing. It was eerily dark, the kind of dark that feels like it's watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. I suggested turning off our lights. Sometimes the glare made it harder to see in such blackness, and she reluctantly agreed. The moment we did, the forest came alive in a new way, shadows shifting in the faint starlight. Every rustle amplified in the stillness. It helped a little, enough to make out the dirt path leading back to the car park, but the unease in my chest grew heavier with every step, a primal instinct whispering that we weren't alone. As we reached the main dirt path, something caught the corner of my eye, a flash of white stark against the dark, near a tree about 12 feet behind us, at my 4 to 5 o'clock position. My heart stuttered, a cold dread creeping up my spine as I turned to look, and what I saw froze me in place. It was a figure, tall and thin, glowing with a faint, unnatural white light, hovering a foot off the ground. I turned away almost instantly, my mind rejecting what I'd seen, but the image burned into me, a ghostly shape, featureless, like a smudge of light in the air. I took a few shaky steps, my breath fogging in the icy air before I could speak. "Babe, did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, let's get out of here." And her words hit me like a punch, confirming. The terror I'd hoped was mine alone. We glanced back and my stomach dropped. The thing was closer now, right behind us, its glow casting faint shadows on the path. We ran, adrenaline surging, our feet pounding the frozen ground as we fled, uphill toward the car park. It was a respectable walk on a good day. But that night, we sprinted as if the hill were flat, fear driving us faster than I thought possible, until the lights of the car park came into view, a beacon of safety in the dark. We stopped, gasping for air, our hands trembling as we leaned against the car. The thing hadn't followed us, but its presence lingered, a weight on my chest I couldn't shake. It had been about 6 to 7 feet tall, a skittish figure with no discernible arms, legs, or face, just a glowing white form, like a distorted milk ice cream stick, semi-transparent, yet solid enough to hold shape. It hovered, defying gravity, its light unnatural, as if it had been pulled from another world. I can still see it clearly, the memory as vivid as if it happened yesterday, every detail etched into my mind, the way it moved without sound, the way it seemed to shimmer, a white smudge against the black forest. I'd always been a skeptic, dismissing ghost stories as superstition, but that night I saw proof that something beyond our understanding exists. My partner's confirmation made it undeniable. She'd seen it too, describing the same glowing figure, the same featureless form, her words mirroring mine down to the smallest detail. If I'd been alone, I'd have questioned my sanity, convinced myself it was a trick of the light, but her fear was as real as mine. I went back to 14 Locks weeks later, determined to debunk what we'd seen, searching for signs, posts, anything that could have reflected moonlight or light pollution. But there was nothing. No object that tall, no surface capable of reflecting light in that way. The thing had been real, a presence that knew we were there, that wanted us to see it. The second time I glanced back, it was closer, too close, as if it had been drawn to us, curious or hunting. I've heard similar stories since then, tales of glowing figures in the woods, but no one believed them either, and I understand why. It sounds insane. But I know what we saw, and it's changed me, made me question everything I thought I knew. Was it a ghost? A spirit? Something alien? Why did it appear that night after years of walking that path without incident? I'll never go back to those woods at night, but I can't help wondering if it's still there, waiting for someone else to see it. The countryside hides its monsters, and some walk in the light of dawn. I was 28, living in a remote Lincolnshire village, my days tethered to the rhythm of driving my then-boyfriend to and from his night shifts. Our brand new car, barely 18 miles on the clock, was my shield against the dark, winding lanes of rural England. Lincolnshire was a flat, endless canvas of farmers' fields, stitched together by thin roads and rows of young trees, their branches just budding in the spring of 1997. At 5:30 a.m., the horizon glowed with the first light, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. It was beautiful until it wasn't. I loved those quiet drives, the world mine alone, but that morning something waited in the fields. Something that didn't belong. Something that knew I was coming. As I drove, the radio hummed low, the air crisp with the scent of dew and earth. The solitude was comforting, but the fields felt too vast, the trees too still. My boyfriend had once told me a local tale, half drunk at the pub, about the stick men of Lincolnshire. Old farmers say they walk at dawn, he'd said, his voice teasing but uneasy. Tall as trees, thin as reeds, gone when you look twice. I'd laughed, blaming folklore and too much ale, but the story stuck, surfacing now as the road stretched empty before me. Just a myth. The trees lined the fields, their gangly forms casting long shadows in the rising sun, but the air grew heavy, tinged with a faint, acrid smell, like burnt metal. Keep driving. Don't stop. My hands tightened on the wheel, the car's hum my only anchor in the silence. I slowed to watch the sunrise, a habit born of countless drives, the fields glowing under the soft light. Then I saw it. In my peripheral vision, 2 trees moved, not swayed but stepped, breaking from their orderly. Bro, that's not right. I stopped the car, heart stuttering, squinting against the dawn. They weren't trees. 2 figures, tall and thin, glided across the field, their forms fluid, like silk rippling in water. The tallest stood near 12 feet, the other maybe 10, their limbs impossibly long, nearly brushing the ground. What are they? Their bodies were insect-like, segmented and pale, moving with a grace that felt wrong, unnatural. The air thickened, the burnt metal smell sharper, my breath shallow as I watched them approach. Don't look. Drive. But my eyes were locked, the world narrowing to those impossible shapes. The figures drew closer, now 50 yards away, their movements hypnotic, deliberate. Their arms swayed like reeds, their legs bending at angles no creature should. No faces, just smooth, featureless heads, reflecting the dawn's light in a sickly sheen. They see me. The car felt small, a fragile shell against whatever they were. The radio crackled, static drowning the music, the dashboard lights flickering. Start the car. Go. I fumbled with the key, but the tallest figure raised its arm, slow and deliberate, pointing at me. A jolt shot through my jaw, a searing pain like biting foil spreading to my skull. My teeth. God, my teeth. The engine sputtered, then died, every warning light blazing red. The air was electric, heavy with that acrid stench, my vision blurring as the pain intensified. They're doing this, I screamed, the sound raw, my hands shaking as I turned the key again. Please, start. The figures were closer, 30 yards now, their forms shimmering as if half real. The pain in my jaw was unbearable, a pulsing fire, but I slammed the ignition off, then on. The engine roared to life, the lights stabilizing. Go. Now. I floored the gas, the car lurching forward, the figures receding in the rear view. Those arms, that point. My jaw throbbed, each pulse a reminder of their touch, their power. I drove like a woman possessed, the fields blurring past, until I reached my boyfriend's workplace. He handed me water, his face pale as I stammered what I'd seen. But the pain didn't fade, a constant echo of those eyeless forms. They marked me. For weeks my mouth burned, my jaw aching like I'd chewed glass. I avoided metal cutlery, each touch sending shocks through my teeth like licking a battery. The dentist was baffled. My amalgam fillings, 3 in my lower molars, were melted, smoothed into perfect silver spheres. Like they were heated, he said, frowning. I told him about the creatures, the pain, the stalled car. But his silence said it all. I sounded mad, but I know what I saw. The fields of Lincolnshire are still there, those trees still standing, but I don't drive that road anymore. Are they still walking, waiting? Every ache in my jaw, every flicker of light pulls me back to that dawn, those long arms, that pointed finger. Did they let me go, or are they still watching? Some nights I dream of them, gliding through the fields, and I wake gasping, my teeth humming, certain they're closer than I think. The farmhouse didn't just stand on the land. It clung to it, its walls heavy with secrets that seeped into your dreams. From age 2 to 10, I called that place home. A sprawling relic in a forgotten corner of the countryside, where the fields stretched endless and the nights were too dark to trust. Have you ever lived somewhere that felt like it was watching you, even when you were alone? My mother used to say I'd wake up crying, pointing to the foot of my bed, babbling about a man who sat there, staring. I don't remember those nights, but the fear lingered, a shadow stitched into my childhood. Picture a house where every room holds a memory you can't quite grasp. I was maybe 7 when it happened. A morning like any other, the air thick with the scent of dew and hay. My mother shook me awake, her voice sharp. "Get up, you'll be late for school." She disappeared into the bathroom next door, the shower hissing to life. I stretched, my eyes heavy, but as I swung my legs over the bed, something clamped around my ankles, cold, unyielding, like iron forged from the dark. Feel your heart stop, your breath caught in a vice. A low, guttural sound filled the room, not quite a growl, but something primal, something that knew my name. You ever feel fear so raw it pins you in place? I froze, tears burning my eyes until the grip loosened, the sound fading. I tried again, slower, and it came back, tighter, louder, a warning. My mother stormed in, exasperated, and I stammered, "Something's holding me." She didn't believe me, her eyes dismissing it as a child's nightmare, but I saw her glance at the corner just for a second. Listen closely now. That house never felt safe after that. One night, desperate for comfort, I carried Oreo, our tabby cat, to my room, shutting the door to keep her close. Imagine a child clinging to a pet, hoping it can ward off the dark. I set her on the bed, but she bolted underneath, her body low, a deep feral rumble rising from her throat. You ever see an animal sense something you can't? She leaped onto my chest, her claws raking my face, her teeth grazing my cheek before she dove back under, hissing like she was fighting a ghost. I scrambled out, my heart pounding, and when I opened the door, she shot past me, never returning to that room. It wasn't just me. My brother and I saw it one night, a figure, tall and formless, reaching for a shelf in the living room. Close, your eyes and see it, a shadow that moves when it shouldn't. Its hand brushed a glass unicorn, a treasure my mother brought from Mexico, and it shattered on the floor, the sound waking our parents. We screamed about the shadow man, but they blamed us, their voices sharp with disbelief. You ever tell the truth and feel it burn because no one listens? The house held other secrets. My mother heard a 5-gallon bucket sliding across the basement, floor at night, back and forth like a game played by no one. What if a house remembers its pain and makes you feel it too? Let me tell you a story my mother kept hidden. The house belonged to my father's uncle, a solitary man who collapsed at the front door, his heart giving out, his body found days later. Some said his spirit never left, trapped in the walls where he fell. What if death leaves a mark that doesn't fade? Years after we moved, I contacted the new owners, my curiosity outweighing my fear. Their reply chilled me. Their son, Triton, saw someone in his doorway, a figure that lingered when no one was there. The same room, the same shadow. I'm grown now, far from that farmhouse, but its weight clings to me. Lie still tonight. Feel the dark at the edge of your bed. Sometimes I wake to a faint pressure on my ankles, a whisper of that guttural sound, as if the shadow man followed me. What would you do if you felt it, knowing it's been waiting all these years, knowing it's real? In the silence of a county jail, the darkness watches, and sometimes it sees you back. For a year, I was locked in a concrete cell, my world reduced to 4 walls and a narrow window to the great room beyond. The jail was a place of routine, of clanging doors and flickering lights. But in the early morning hours, when the world held its breath, something else stirred. I thought I was alone, but one night, a presence found me, and its eyes burned red in a void that swallowed hope. Life in lockdown was a grind, each day bleeding into the next, time blurred by a broken clock on the block. Step into a cage where seconds stretch into eternity, where every sound feels like a threat. I was confined to my cell, my only view a small, reinforced window that framed the great room, a cavernous space of shadows and echoes. At night, during quiet hours, the jail felt alive, its air thick with the weight of unseen things. I'd lie on my bunk, reading to pass the hours, my mind drifting between the pages and the world outside. The routine was my anchor, but even anchors can slip in the dark. It started with shadows. At first, they were fleeting, silhouettes gliding past my window, their shapes vague against the dim lights of the great room. Feel that moment when your eyes play tricks, when doubt creeps, like a cold draft. I told myself they were guards, making rounds, checking cells to ensure we were still there. But something was off. The doors, heavy and loud, never opened or closed. No clank, no echo, just silence. Curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to look, to know. I'd climb from my bunk, pressing my face to the glass, straining to catch a glimpse of a guard returning to his post. Nothing. The great room was empty, its shadows still mocking my unease. Weeks passed, the silhouettes a constant, their presence a puzzle I couldn't solve. Then came the night that broke me. I was reading, the words blurring under the cell's harsh light when a feeling hit me. A prickling, visceral sense of being watched. Imagine a gaze so heavy it pins you, a predator's stare from the dark. The shadows had always moved, passing like ghosts, but this was different. It didn't pass. It stayed. A presence that felt eternal, as if it had always been there, waiting. I froze, my book forgotten, my heart pounding against the silence. Look, my mind whispered, but fear held me back. Slowly, I raised my eyes to the window, and there it was, a void, a blackness deeper than night, shapeless, yet alive. In its center, burned 2 red eyes glowing like embers, unblinking, locked on me. I was prey, and it was hunting. The eyes didn't move, didn't blink, but their gaze bored into me, stripping away my defenses. Time dissolved, each second a lifetime as fear became my world. I couldn't look directly, my vision fixed on the edges of the void, but I felt its malice, its patience waiting for me to break. Close your eyes and see them, twin fires in a sea of nothing, watching, wanting. My breath came in shallow gasps, my body rigid as I pretended not to notice, clinging to the hope that ignorance would save me. Don't move. Don't acknowledge it. Just survive. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell, until exhaustion claimed me and I slept, the eyes fading into dreams that offered no escape. It never came again, but it didn't need to. The memory of those eyes lingered, a scar on my soul, a reminder of the darkness that thrives in places like that. Recall a time you felt truly seen, not by a person, but by something else. I told my girlfriend, my voice low, my words halting, unable to capture the weight of that night. She listened, her eyes wide, but I spared her the details, the raw terror of being hunted. The jail is behind me, but those eyes are not. They wait somewhere, for someone else to meet their gaze. I'm grateful for this space to share, to let the fear breathe, because some truths are too heavy to carry alone.